There are stories that move like shadows across time, tales whispered in stone and carved into clay tablets older than memory itself. They tell us that humanity may not have walked its first steps alone. In the dust of Mesopotamia, among rivers that carried both life and legend, scribes etched names of beings who came from the skies, clothed not in wings, but in power. These figures, called the Anunnaki, stand at the border between gods and something stranger, visitors who shaped the world and left riddles behind. Some say they were nothing more than myth, reflections of human longing projected into the heavens. Others argue they were engineers of flesh and spirit, architects of civilizations, guardians and deceivers in equal measure. Whether myth or memory, their presence lingers like an echo in ancient myths of flood and fire, in monuments aligned with the stars, in questions about why we are here and who we were meant to be. This journey will not claim to settle the mystery, but to walk through it, exploring the fragments and possibilities left scattered across cultures and centuries, inviting you to drift into a landscape where history blurs with wonder. Welcome to Deformed History. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The beginning always feels like a return, even when we are tracing stories that stretch beyond memory. Imagine the cradle of Mesopotamia, the wide valleys shaped by the Tigris and Euphrates, where fertile soil rose out of river floods and human hands first pressed seeds into the earth. Here, cities grew like improbable islands in a sea of wilderness, with ziggurats lifting their steps toward the sun and temples alive with chants that have long since fallen silent. Among these ancient walls, on clay tablets hardened by fire and time, we encounter names that still carry an aura of mystery. Anu, Enlil, Enki, Inanna. They were described as gods, yet not in the abstract way later theology would imagine. They were painted as rulers with bodies, voices, tempers, passions. They walked among humans, they feasted, they loved, they waged wars. To the scribes, they were not symbols but presences, as tangible as the rulers who sat on thrones in Uruk or Lagash. But the question has always been whether those presences were the inventions of poets or the memories of encounters with something beyond the human frame. The oldest myths describe the Anunnaki as the offspring of An, the Sky Father, and Ki, the Earth Mother, a lineage born from the union of heaven and soil. Yet their portrayal is inconsistent, almost contradictory. Sometimes judges of the underworld, other times lords of creation, still elsewhere a pantheon of advisors to more dominant deities. Out of these layers, a tantalizing hypothesis emerged in modern centuries, that the Anunnaki were not gods in the spiritual sense, but visitors from another world, perhaps even another planet. This idea, popularized in the 20th century by authors like Zecharia Sitchin, rests not only on interpretation of myths, but on a sense of absence, the nagging gap in human prehistory, the sudden leap from hunter-gatherer bands to structured societies capable of astronomy, mathematics, and monumental architecture. The leap seems so abrupt that some wonder whether it was guided, perhaps engineered by hands unseen. Think for a moment of the clay tablets known as the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, where the heavens are divided, stars are named, and destinies inscribed. In one translation, the Anunnaki are described as numbering 300 in the heavens and 300 on the earth, a symmetry that suggests more than metaphor. When they march to war against the chaos dragon Tiamat, they do so with weapons described in ways that stir the modern imagination. Blazing nets, roaring winds, arrows that shatter from within. To ancient readers, these were symbols of divine authority. To some modern readers, they sound like technological descriptions passed through the filter of poetry, visions of craft and weaponry too advanced for the scribes to describe, except with the metaphors of storm and flame. This is the tension at the heart of the Anunnaki mystery. Myth on one side, memory of something stranger on the other. Archaeologists will tell us, rightly, that civilizations like Sumer developed irrigation, writing, and governance through human ingenuity, trial and error, and adaptation to the challenges of river-valley life. Yet the myths themselves insist on another story. In the Atrahasis epic, humanity is created because the lesser gods, called the Igigi, grew tired of digging canals and working the fields for their masters. Their rebellion led to a meeting of the great gods, who resolved to fashion a new being from clay mixed with divine essence, a laborer race capable of enduring toil without complaint. Thus, according to the story, the first humans were born, not as children of the earth alone, but as hybrids, creatures with the spark of the divine, made to serve. The resonance of this myth is difficult to ignore, especially when set against modern knowledge of genetics and the awareness that human DNA carries unexplained anomalies, sudden shifts that do not fit neatly into the slow rhythm of evolution. Was this nothing more than narrative invention to explain our condition as workers of the land? Or does it encode a memory of manipulation, of design? As we walk through ruins like Ur, with its great ziggurat rising above the desert plain, or Eridu, which some traditions call the first city, we cannot help but sense that the architecture itself participates in the myth. Temples were not merely places of worship. They were described as dwelling places of the gods, where rituals kept the bond between heaven and earth intact. Priests performed ceremonies to feed the gods, presenting food, drink, music. The gods were expected to arrive, to sit, to receive offerings in person. In these details lies a subtle difference between ancient Mesopotamian religion and the abstractions we know today. The gods were not imagined as absent or purely spiritual, but present, embodied, close enough that humans prepared meals for them daily. If they were inventions that demanded an extraordinary realism. If they were memories, then we are peering into a record of interaction with beings who crossed the threshold between sky and earth. One must also remember how the ancient scribes described the stars. They mapped constellations, recorded lunar cycles with precision, and tracked planetary movements long before the telescope. Inscriptions link the Anunnaki with specific stars and heavenly paths, as though they belonged to the order of the cosmos rather than just the soil of Mesopotamia. Some of these texts speak of Nibiru, a wandering star or planet whose orbit brought it close to the known world in cycles beyond ordinary reckoning. Whether Nibiru was a poetic metaphor for Jupiter, a cipher for something else, or a true memory of a hidden planet remains debated. But the link between the Anunnaki and a celestial homeland persists in the stories, suggesting that their origin was not only divine, but literally stellar. In the rhythm of these tales, one hears a pattern that resonates with myths across cultures. The Greek gods on Olympus mingled with mortals, producing heroes and demigods. The biblical Nephilim, born of the sons of God and daughters of men, echo the idea of hybrid beings who walked in power but carried a dangerous legacy. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, sky beings descend to teach humans, shaping their destiny. Such parallels do not prove contact with visitors from beyond, but they do suggest a universal intuition that humanity has always suspected it was touched, nudged, or perhaps interfered with by forces greater than itself. Whether those forces were projections of our imagination or the footprints of real beings remains the question that fuels both scholarship and speculation. To wander through this puzzle is to feel suspended between skepticism and awe. On one hand, myths are the language by which humans give shape to fears, hopes, and cosmic order. On the other, the specificity of detail, the names, the genealogies, the repeated insistence that gods walked the earth in visible form, makes the possibility of another layer difficult to dismiss entirely. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, that myths preserve faint memories of encounters now shrouded in time, retold until they acquired the polish of legend. Or perhaps the truth is far more extraordinary, waiting for us to recognize that our earliest teachers and rulers were not only human, but something else. Whatever the answer, the Anunnaki remain at the heart of the mystery, inviting us to follow their trail across tablets and ruins, across stories that will not let us go. When we imagine the ancient world, it is tempting to see it as distant, a realm of primitive tools and simple thoughts. Yet in Mesopotamia, the evidence tells another story. The Sumerians, who flourished more than 5,000 years ago, left behind traces of sophistication that still astonish modern scholars. They created cuneiform, the first known system of writing, by pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets. They devised legal codes, trade networks, and a sense of civic order that formed the template for later civilizations. And woven through these achievements were stories that refused to confine themselves to human scale. They spoke of beings whose knowledge surpassed mortal boundaries, who handed down the arts of agriculture, astronomy, and kingship. The Anunnaki were portrayed not as distant spirits, but as givers of culture, almost like teachers, shaping a people who might otherwise have remained wanderers in the wilderness. It is here that the line between myth and history begins to blur, raising the question of whether human brilliance bloomed alone or whether it sprouted in the soil of guidance. One of the most evocative myths concerns Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters, a figure who straddles trickster and benefactor. In the tales, he is the one who intervenes when humanity is threatened with extinction, whispering warnings to Atrahasis of a flood meant to cleanse the earth. He is also said to have devised the blueprint for civilization, teaching humans how to build canals, how to measure land, how to record transactions. If one imagines Enki not as a god, but as a bearer of knowledge, the question arises, where did such knowledge originate? Did it spring purely from human trial and error, or was it seeded by encounters with a source beyond the human? The stories hint that the Anunnaki held technologies so advanced that to the Sumerians they seemed indistinguishable from magic. Tools that could move great stones, devices that could fly or shine with unnatural brilliance. These are mentioned obliquely, wrapped in metaphor, yet their persistence in the myths is striking. The Sumerian king list provides another tantalizing clue. This ancient text catalogues rulers who reigned for impossibly long spans, thousands of years, before a great flood reset history. After the flood, reigns became shorter, measured in centuries and then in decades, until they resembled the mortal lifespans we know today. Scholars generally interpret these exaggerated numbers as symbolic, but the pattern raises unsettling possibilities. Could the earliest rulers have been something other than human, beings whose longevity came from another source? Or is this simply the poetic stretching of numbers to confer grandeur? Either way, the king list reflects a worldview in which divine and human governance were deeply intertwined, a world where kingship was considered a gift handed down from heaven itself. This connection between rulership and the Anunnaki reinforces the idea that human authority was legitimized by association with beings who claimed dominion beyond Earth. It is not only texts that fuel the mystery. Artifacts themselves seem to whisper fragments of a forgotten conversation. Cylinder seals, those small carved stones rolled onto wet clay, depict figures in elaborate attire, seated on thrones or standing before symbols of stars and planets. In some images, humans appear much smaller than the towering figures they serve, reinforcing the sense of a hierarchy between mortals and something greater. Certain seals even show what looks like a stylized solar system with a central sun surrounded by planets, including one that appears beyond the orbit of known worlds. For some interpreters, this is evidence that the Sumerians possessed astronomical knowledge they should not have had unless it was taught by someone else. Mainstream archaeology cautions against such readings, reminding us that symbolic art is not always literal. Yet the images persist, fueling speculation that ancient eyes saw more than we are willing to admit. The flood narrative offers one of the strongest bridges between Mesopotamian myth and global traditions. In the Atrahasis epic and later the Epic of Gilgamesh, a cataclysmic flood wipes out humanity, sparing only the chosen survivor warned by a god. The parallels with the biblical story of Noah are undeniable, as are echoes found in myths from India, Mesoamerica, and beyond. Some argue that these shared stories reflect a collective memory of real events, perhaps a massive flood at the end of the last ice age when glaciers melted and sea levels rose dramatically. But in Mesopotamian versions, the flood is not simply a natural disaster. It is a decision of the gods, a deliberate act of cleansing. The Anunnaki, disturbed by humanity's noise and rebellion, decree destruction, and only the intervention of Enki allows a remnant to endure. The suggestion here is chilling, that humanity's survival hinged not on luck, but on the choices of beings who claimed authority over our fate. From the vantage of modern thought, it is tempting to dismiss these tales as allegory, yet their consistency across cultures hints at something deeper. Was there a time when knowledge was imparted to humanity suddenly, as though gifted? Anthropologists call this the Sumerian problem, the puzzle of how complex urban society appeared so abruptly. Most hunter-gatherer groups transition to farming over millennia, yet in Mesopotamia we see the rapid rise of cities, writing, and astronomy within a few centuries. Explanations abound: fertile soil, irrigation, population pressure. Yet some wonder if the myths themselves provide another explanation, that humanity's leap was not entirely its own. The Anunnaki, whether real beings or archetypal teachers, are portrayed as the catalysts of that leap. They are the ones who crossed the threshold between survival and civilization. Consider, too, the way memory lingers in language. Words for God in Sumerian texts do not always carry the abstract sense of later theology. The cuneiform sign for dingir, often translated as God, is also the symbol for star. Thus, when a text speaks of the Anunnaki as dingir, it can mean gods, but it can also mean beings of the stars. This overlap between celestial and divine may not be coincidence. It reflects a worldview in which those who came from the skies were regarded as gods precisely because they descended from the heavens. When later cultures adopted these terms, the celestial link often faded, but in the earliest stories, it remains visible, hinting at origins not of this earth. Walking through these myths is like moving through a hall of mirrors. Each reflection distorts, yet each preserves a glimpse of something that may have been real. Were the Anunnaki actual beings who visited Earth, mined its resources, and guided its inhabitants? Or were they projections of the human mind, embodiments of forces beyond comprehension? The truth may forever elude us. But as long as clay tablets endure and monuments rise against the desert sky, the voices of the Sumerians will continue to whisper that humanity's beginning was not entirely its own, that we were shaped, in part, by hands we barely understand. In that whisper lies the seed of fascination, a mystery that will carry us deeper into the shadows of history, where the Anunnaki wait like figures at the edge of firelight, half real, half dream, beckoning us onward. To move deeper into the labyrinth of the Anunnaki, one must confront the question of their supposed origin. The myths speak of heavens and distant realms, and later interpretations, most controversially in the 20th century, connected them with a wandering planet known as Nibiru. Whether Nibiru was ever part of the original Sumerian imagination is contested, but the idea has taken root in modern retellings. According to this narrative, Nibiru is a planet on a vast elliptical orbit, returning close to Earth only after thousands of years. On that planet, life evolved under different conditions, producing beings far more advanced than humans at the dawn of civilization. When environmental catastrophe threatened their world, they sought resources elsewhere, and Earth, rich in gold, became their destination. Gold, not as jewelry or coin, but as a substance with unique properties, capable of stabilizing their atmosphere, restoring balance to a world in peril. In this telling, the Anunnaki were not gods in the metaphysical sense, but explorers, colonists, and resource seekers. Their descent to Earth was not a matter of divine whim, but of survival, necessity written across the sky. In mythic fragments, we glimpse this motivation refracted through stories of divine labor and rebellion. The Igigi, the younger gods, are said to have toiled endlessly in the earthworks of Mesopotamia, digging canals, raising the infrastructure of life. We are told they grew restless, weary of their burden, and so the senior Anunnaki resolved to create a new race to carry the load. Humans, molded from clay mixed with divine essence, were designed to replace celestial workers. The allegory is clear: humanity as servant, as instrument of labor. Yet when seen through the lens of the Nibiru hypothesis, the story takes on another shade. If the Anunnaki came seeking resources, then their engineering of a new species may not have been myth at all, but an early attempt at biotechnology, a means to create laborers adapted to Earth's environment, capable of mining and farming without rebellion. The clay of the story could be read as the Earth's genetic material, reshaped by hands that understood manipulation of life at a level only now hinted at by our own science. Genetics today offers metaphors the ancients could never have grasped, yet some passages in their myths resonate eerily with modern terms. One text describes the creation of humanity as a mixing of the blood of the gods with the substance of earth. In light of modern biology, this phrase sounds like the introduction of genetic code into an existing primate lineage, a hybridization process explained in mythic language. Homo sapiens, then, would not have been a natural progression from earlier hominids, but a leap engineered for purpose. This interpretation is speculative, yes, but it addresses an old puzzle. Why does the fossil record show sudden advances in brain size, tool use, and culture within a relatively short evolutionary span? The leap from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens, marked by symbolic thought, language, and culture, has long provoked debate. Could that leap have been nudged, not by chance mutation alone, but by deliberate intervention? The echoes of this possibility ripple outward into global myth. In the book of Genesis, humanity is formed from the dust of the ground and the breath of God, a narrative strikingly parallel to the clay and divine essence of Sumer. In the book of Enoch, heavenly beings called watchers descend to earth, intermingling with humans, teaching them forbidden knowledge, and fathering the Nephilim, the giants of old. In Greek mythology, Prometheus shapes humans from clay and gives them fire, an act of creation and of rebellion. In the myths of the Dogon people of Africa, amphibian-like beings arrive from the star Sirius, bringing knowledge of astronomy that aligns uncannily with modern measurements. These parallels do not prove the existence of alien visitors, but they illustrate a recurring motif: the belief that humanity was shaped, aided, or altered by those who came from the stars. The Anunnaki may be the Mesopotamian expression of a global intuition, a story retold in many tongues across continents. Artifacts deepen the intrigue. The Sumerians tracked the skies with a precision that seems out of place for their era. They recognized the 5 visible planets, charted lunar eclipses, and constructed calendars that aligned with solstices and equinoxes. In their artwork, they depicted winged discs hovering above figures, symbols often interpreted as divine presence, but to modern eyes resembling vehicles of flight. One seal in particular, often cited in alternative theories, appears to show a cluster of spheres orbiting around a central sun, a miniature solar system with more bodies than were known in antiquity. Whether this was symbolic, artistic flourish, or genuine astronomical knowledge remains debated. Yet it raises the unsettling thought: if such knowledge was indeed accurate, where did it come from? Without telescopes, without space travel, how could the Sumerians have charted what we only confirmed in recent centuries? One answer is human genius, another is transmission, knowledge handed down by beings who traversed the stars. And yet, these stories are never simple. The Anunnaki are not portrayed as purely benevolent. They are quarrelsome, divided, prone to jealousy and vengeance. Enlil is depicted as stern, harsh, ready to destroy humanity when its clamor offends him. Enki is sly, compassionate, a trickster who bends rules to preserve life. Inanna, goddess of love and war, is fierce, ambitious, unpredictable. If the Anunnaki were truly visitors, then they were not gods in the sense of moral perfection, but beings with flaws, with politics, with rivalries. They may have brought knowledge, but they also brought conflict, using humanity as pawns in struggles that mirrored their own disputes. This aspect of the myth challenges any simplistic view of them as saviors. Instead, it presents a portrait of power that is both creative and destructive, a mirror of our own human contradictions writ large upon the sky. The story of mining gold, so central to modern retellings, is less explicit in the ancient texts, but emerges in the logic of necessity. If their purpose was to stabilize their planet's atmosphere, then Earth's gold offered a solution. Archaeologists note that early Mesopotamian society valued gold not only for ornament, but for its incorruptible nature. It does not tarnish. It reflects light eternally. To the Anunnaki, if they existed, such qualities would not have been symbolic, but practical. Gold could be transformed into nanoparticles, suspended in their skies to reflect radiation, heal the wound of a dying world. Whether this is fanciful speculation or not, it reveals something essential about the myth's endurance. It gives purpose to human origins, a reason why we exist at all. We were created, according to this story, not by accident, but by design, to serve a cosmic project that stretched beyond Earth itself. In wandering these myths, it is easy to feel caught between wonder and unease. If the Anunnaki were real, then humanity's earliest history is not a tale of independence, but of dependency, of servitude to beings we mistook for gods. If they were not real, then the myths reveal something about ourselves, that we have always sensed the possibility of being shaped by forces beyond our control, whether divine or alien. Either way, the stories resonate because they ask the oldest question: where did we come from, and why are we here? The Sumerians answered with the Anunnaki, beings of sky and earth who walked among them, guided them, and left them. That answer continues to echo, inviting us to imagine that our beginnings are entangled with mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. When we picture the world of the Anunnaki through the lens of Mesopotamian myth, the images that arise are not only of gods shaping clay and decreeing laws, but of vast landscapes altered by their presence. The plains of Sumer were not empty. They were marked by canals, temples, and walls that seemed to grow from the dust with startling rapidity. At the center of these cities rose ziggurats, stepped pyramids that towered above the land, their brickwork painted in vivid colors, their summits crowned with sanctuaries said to house the gods themselves. To the Sumerians, these were not simply places of worship, but stairways, bridges between heaven and earth. Priests ascended their steps with offerings, believing the Anunnaki descended to meet them halfway. When archaeologists uncovered the ruins of the great ziggurat of Ur, they found evidence of sophisticated construction, layers of bitumen waterproofing, and baked bricks aligned with astronomical precision. To modern eyes, such monuments speak of human ingenuity, but within the myths, they are evidence of something else: technology and knowledge bestowed from above, a blueprint handed down by those who sought to leave their mark on the land they briefly called home. It is here that the question of architecture and alignment becomes crucial. Many ancient cultures built monuments that appear tied to the movements of the stars. the pyramids of Egypt aligned with Orion's belt, Stonehenge with solstices, the Nazca lines with constellations. The Sumerians, too, embedded their cosmic vision into stone and clay. Texts describe temples as houses of the gods, each dedicated not only to a deity, but to a star or constellation. Some inscriptions even specify that gods came and went by means of shems, a word that can mean both name and flying vessel. Ancient translators rendered it as fame or monument, but others have suggested it described vehicles descending from the heavens. When figures are depicted standing before winged discs, with flames streaming downward, the imagination cannot help but wonder if these were artistic memories of crafts seen in the sky. For the ancients, they were symbols of divine power. For us, they may be glimpses of something technological, misunderstood but faithfully recorded. The ziggurat, in this light, becomes more than a temple. It becomes a platform, a docking station of sorts, where heaven touched earth. Legends say that Enlil, the stern lord of the winds, had his temple at Nippur, where decrees of destiny were issued. Enki's home at Eridu was said to be built upon the primordial waters, filled with the wisdom of the deep. Each of these temples contained sacred objects, described as tablets of destinies, glowing artifacts that recorded cosmic order and determined the fates of gods and men alike. Whether these were symbols of divine law or devices that carried real knowledge is left to interpretation. But to imagine them as repositories of advanced technology is not far-fetched in the framework of the Anunnaki hypothesis. One wonders whether within those temples lay tools or records beyond human understanding, lost now to time, leaving behind only the stories of their presence. The stories also describe journeys between earth and sky in strikingly concrete terms. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero seeks out Utnapishtim, survivor of the flood, traveling through mountains guarded by scorpion men whose glance is said to scorch the earth. These guardians open gates that lead to the path of the sun, a tunnel of darkness traversed until daylight bursts forth on the other side. Scholars interpret this as a metaphor for death and rebirth, but others imagine it as a description of passage into a tunnel or craft, a journey to another realm. Gilgamesh's desire for immortality, his quest for secrets of the gods, mirrors humanity's own longing for the knowledge the Anunnaki were said to possess, knowledge of life extension, of the stars, of engineering beyond mortal grasp. In failing to attain it, Gilgamesh embodies our condition, aware of the possibility of greater power but bound by the limits of our flesh. The Anunnaki are also remembered not just for their gifts, but for their control. The myths emphasize their authority over human kingship. The Sumerians believed that kingship descended from heaven, meaning rulers were appointed by divine will. In practice, this meant that political authority was inseparable from divine sanction. Kings claimed lineage from the gods, or at least their favor, using this claim to cement power. If the Anunnaki were truly present, then these early kings may have been literal hybrids, carrying genetic traces of their creators. The king list, with its impossible reign lengths, reinforces this suggestion. Before the flood, rulers reigned for thousands of years. Afterward, their lives shortened. This may symbolize the withdrawal of divine presence, the transition from a world directly governed by Anunnaki to one managed by their human heirs. the pattern is not unique. In Egypt, pharaohs claimed descent from Ra, the sun god, and were embalmed with rituals to ensure return to the stars. In Mesoamerica, rulers traced their origins to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Across cultures, authority was inseparable from the sky, and the Anunnaki narrative provides one possible explanation. Perhaps rulers did inherit something not entirely human. To understand how deeply this belief shaped daily life, one must look at the rituals. Temples were filled with statues, not inert objects, but considered living embodiments of the gods. Priests clothed them, fed them, sang to them. The gods, it was said, required nourishment, and in exchange they blessed the land with fertility. Yet some texts describe the gods consuming strange substances, drinks of power, foods of immortality. The Sumerians spoke of the bread of life and the water of life, consumed only by the gods. Later, in the Bible, we encounter the tree of life, fruit granting eternal existence, barred from Adam and Eve after their disobedience. Might these be cultural echoes of a real substance, some biochemical source of vitality known to the Anunnaki but withheld from humanity? It is speculation, but it reveals the way myth and material intertwine. Survival, power, longevity, all framed as gifts controlled by beings who stood above humanity. One cannot ignore the tension between the Anunnaki themselves. The myths are filled with conflict, not only between gods and humans, but among the gods themselves. Enlil's harsh decrees clash with Enki's subversive compassion. Inanna battles for supremacy, descending to the underworld and returning, reborn. These stories show that the Anunnaki, whatever they were not united. They quarreled, waged war, divided territories. If they were real beings, this paints a picture of colonists as fractured as any human empire, ambitious, divided, sometimes ruthless. Humanity may have been caught in their disputes, used as soldiers or servants in battles that were not our own. The echoes of this possibility linger in later myths of fallen angels, of titans cast into Tartarus, of gods exiled from heaven. Power struggles are universal, and the Anunnaki were no exception, their rivalries leaving humanity as both beneficiary and victim. The monuments, the myths, the rituals, all converge on a single impression. Humanity was not alone in its earliest steps. Whether as gods imagined or beings real, the Anunnaki are woven into the fabric of civilization's dawn. Their memory survives in stone inscriptions and whispered prayers, in ruined ziggurats and flood narratives. To walk among these ruins is to feel the weight of presence, the sense that something extraordinary once moved here. Skeptics will argue that the Anunnaki were projections, cultural creations to explain the unknown. Believers will argue that they were flesh and blood visitors who altered our destiny. Perhaps the truth lies between. Myths are not literal, but neither are they empty. They are vessels carrying fragments of memory, distorted by time, but anchored in real encounters. As the sun sets over the Mesopotamian plain and shadows lengthen across ancient bricks, one feels the echo of those encounters, the possibility that the Anunnaki once walked here, and that their footsteps remain, faint but indelible, in the stories that refuse to die. The deeper we follow the trail of the Anunnaki, the more their image becomes entangled with one of humanity's most enduring mysteries, the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge where there should have been only tentative experimentation. Ancient Mesopotamia was not merely a land of temples and kings, it was a workshop of science, where scribes recorded astronomical data with startling accuracy, where engineers laid out irrigation networks, where mathematicians worked with base 60 numbers that still echo today in our 60 minutes and 360 degrees. To imagine a people 5,000 years ago dividing circles into perfect geometry or predicting lunar eclipses is to marvel at human brilliance. But to those who embrace the Anunnaki hypothesis, such marvels are evidence of something else. Knowledge transferred, not discovered. If beings with millennia of experience had walked among the Sumerians, then the sudden emergence of science was no miracle of human genius, but a deliberate passing of tools, a mentorship that altered the course of history forever. One of the most striking features of Sumerian astronomy lies in their treatment of the planets. They recognized not only the sun, moon, and visible wanderers, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, but described them in ways that suggest a broader system. Certain tablets list a 12-membered order of the heavens, which, when interpreted literally, would include bodies beyond the visible eye. In later reinterpretations, this became associated with the idea of Nibiru, the hidden planet whose orbit carried it far from the sun. But even without that controversial link, the sheer detail in Mesopotamian sky watching is remarkable. They charted the Saros cycle, predicting eclipses with precision that modern science only rediscovered thousands of years later. They associated each planet with a deity, embedding astronomical knowledge into myth. Jupiter was Marduk, Venus was Inanna, Saturn was Ninurta. To them, these were not cold stones, but living powers, part of a cosmic order governed by the Anunnaki. Yet behind the myth lies a question. How did a people without telescopes gather such knowledge? Did they inherit fragments of a science older than their civilization, passed down from teachers whose origins remain hidden? Mathematics, too, bears the stamp of strangeness. The base 60 system appears almost arbitrary to modern minds accustomed to tens, yet it provides extraordinary flexibility for division, producing clean fractions where decimal struggles. Why 60? Some suggest it arises naturally from combining base 10 with base 6, counting both fingers and segments of fingers. Others see in it a deliberate design, a system chosen for its cosmic resonance. 60 was sacred to Anu, the Sky Father, whose number symbolized the highest divine authority. From 60 came multiples that ordered not only mathematics, but also time and space. When the Sumerians divided the heavens into 360 degrees, they inscribed the circle with a precision still used in modern science. Was this the fruit of human abstraction, or was it instruction, a gift of celestial teachers embedding their own system into human thought? The line between ingenuity and inheritance blurs here, and the myths themselves offer no clear answer, only hints that knowledge was given as well as earned. Agriculture, too, carries the fingerprints of guidance. The Sumerians cultivated wheat, barley, dates, and flax, crops requiring not only irrigation, but careful timing. Their calendars tracked planting and harvest, aligning with lunar cycles. Myths describe the gods teaching humans the arts of farming, showing them how to plow, sow, and reap. Enki, a divine figure, is portrayed as the god of canals and agriculture, a mediator between gods and men, ensuring the fields produced abundance. In these stories, farming is not a human discovery, but a divine gift, bestowed to ensure humanity could fulfill its role as worker and servant. When we look at the archaeological record, we see domestication of grains appearing in multiple regions, but in Mesopotamia it seems to coincide with the rise of cities, as though civilization and agriculture blossomed hand in hand. Was this coincidence, or was it the deliberate design of those who sought to anchor their creations in a reliable food supply? To those who view the Anunnaki as real beings, the answer is clear. Humanity was given agriculture because it served the needs of their masters as much as their own. The myths also speak of metallurgy, of furnaces and forges where ores were smelted into tools and ornaments. Gold, silver, copper all appear in early Mesopotamian contexts. Of these, gold holds special significance, not only for its beauty but for its incorruptibility. Unlike copper, it does not tarnish. Unlike iron, it does not rust. To the Sumerians, gold was the flesh of the gods, shining eternally, reflecting the sun. Temples were gilded, idols plated, jewelry fashioned to shimmer in the light of oil lamps. In the Anunnaki narrative, gold was more than ornament. It was the resource that brought them to Earth. If so, then humanity's fascination with gold, stretching from Sumer to Inca to modern markets, may be the lingering echo of an ancient demand, a genetic memory of service to masters who valued it above all else. We dig it still, mine it, treasure it, hoard it, as though obeying a command whispered long ago. Religion itself was inseparable from science in Mesopotamia. The priests who tended temples were also the astronomers, the keepers of calendars, the interpreters of omens. Every movement of star and planet carried meaning. Every eclipse was a message, every flood a decree of the gods. The Anunnaki were not distant. They were woven into the cycles of the cosmos, their will expressed through the heavens. This worldview shaped daily life, from planting fields to crowning kings. It also shaped fear. When omens predicted disaster, rituals were performed to avert it, sacrifices made, prayers sung. To live in Sumer was to live under the gaze of beings who not only watched but judged, who could bring abundance or destruction with equal ease. This sense of constant oversight may reflect the memory of rulers who truly were present, beings whose technology seemed divine, whose control was absolute. If so, religion was not merely belief, but survival, a negotiation with powers who walked the earth in visible form. Yet the myths also reveal cracks in this order. Humans rebelled, grew noisy, multiplied beyond the gods' patience. Enlil, angered by their clamor, sent plagues, droughts, and finally the flood to reduce their numbers. Only through Enki's intervention did humanity survive. This narrative resonates with a chilling undertone. Humanity was expendable, valuable only as laborers until they became too numerous or unruly. To those who see the Anunnaki as historical beings, this paints a stark picture of our origins, not as chosen children but as disposable workers, tolerated only while useful. And yet, from this unpromising beginning, humanity endured, adapted, and eventually claimed its own destiny. The myths may reveal subjugation, but they also reveal resilience, the ability to survive even the designs of gods. Walking through these stories, one senses both awe and disquiet. The Anunnaki appear as benefactors, bringing knowledge, and as oppressors, demanding obedience. They are teachers and tyrants, creators and destroyers. If they were real, they were not saviors but complex beings with motives as tangled as our own. If they were not real, they are reflections of humanity's struggle with power, our attempt to explain why knowledge came suddenly and why authority seemed to descend from the sky. Either way, they leave us with a haunting legacy. The idea that our beginnings are not fully our own, that civilization was born in the shadow of others. And whether those others were real visitors or projections of our imagination, their presence in the story of humanity is undeniable. The clay tablets endure, carrying their names, and through those tablets, their memory continues to shape the questions we ask about who we are and where we come from. If we pause to consider the way myths travel, we discover something striking. The themes of the Anunnaki are not confined to Mesopotamia, but ripple outward, appearing in cultures separated by oceans and centuries. Stories of gods descending from the sky, teaching arts of civilization, intermingling with mortals, and leaving behind monuments too vast for ordinary hands. These motifs are global. Whether in Egypt, with its solar deities and pyramids aligned to the stars, or in Mesoamerica, with feathered serpents and cities built as mirrors of constellations, the echoes are unmistakable. Some scholars attribute these parallels to the shared human imagination, a universal need to explain the unknown with figures of power. Others, however, see in them the residue of a single influence, a real presence that touched many peoples, remembered in different languages but telling the same essential story. The Anunnaki, in this view, were not only the gods of Sumer, but the prototypes for divine figures across the world, their memory diffused into countless mythologies as humanity scattered and adapted. Egypt offers one of the clearest parallels. The pharaohs were seen not as ordinary rulers, but as incarnations of gods, their bloodline linked directly to Ra, the sun deity. Temples at Karnak and Luxor, pyramids at Giza, and the enigmatic Sphinx stand as monuments that seem both human and otherworldly. The precision with which the pyramids are aligned to the stars, the exact ratios of their geometry, and the sheer scale of their construction have led many to wonder whether knowledge beyond human capacity was involved. Mainstream archaeology attributes these feats to engineering brilliance, organization, and sheer labor. Yet for those who see through the Anunnaki lens, the pyramids are extensions of the same impulse seen in Mesopotamia, structures serving as earthly reflections of celestial order, built under guidance from beings who understood the cosmos in ways humanity was only beginning to glimpse. In myths, too, the parallels deepen. Osiris, who descended from the heavens to teach agriculture and laws, resembles Enki, the god who bestowed wisdom upon humans. Thoth, the keeper of knowledge, mirrors the Sumerian scribal deities who recorded destinies on tablets. Even the stories of divine beings mating with humans, producing semi-divine rulers, resonate with Mesopotamian accounts of hybrid bloodlines. Across the Atlantic, in the highlands of Mesoamerica, similar stories unfold. The Maya revered Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who descended from the sky to bring knowledge of writing, astronomy, and agriculture. The Aztecs called him Quetzalcoatl, a figure both divine and human who departed with the promise to return. The pyramids of Teotihuacan, aligned with celestial events, echo the same architectural marriage of earth and sky seen in Ur or Giza. Here, too, the gods were teachers, civilizers, sometimes destroyers. Some researchers note that myths of Quetzalcoatl describe him as pale-skinned and bearded, an odd description for a deity in Mesoamerica, leading to speculation that he represented a memory of contact with outsiders. But in the Anunnaki framework, Quetzalcoatl and his kin are not foreign humans, but the same visitors remembered in different tongues, their features exaggerated or distorted through centuries of retelling. The pattern repeats. Beings of the sky arrive, impart knowledge, establish rulers, and withdraw, leaving humanity both elevated and abandoned. In India, the stories take on another shape, yet still converge on the theme of celestial intervention. The Vedas and epics describe vimanas, flying chariots that traversed the sky with roaring engines, weapons of fire, and speeds beyond comprehension. Gods and heroes travel in these machines, waging wars that sound eerily like descriptions of advanced technology. The Mahabharata speaks of weapons that unleash blinding light, scorching winds, and destruction akin to nuclear blasts. For centuries, these were dismissed as poetic exaggeration, metaphors for thunder and storm. Yet modern readers, armed with images of mushroom clouds and supersonic craft, cannot help but hear another resonance. If the Anunnaki or their counterparts visited the Earth, could the vimanas be memories of their vehicles, recorded in the only language available to ancient poets? The gods of India, too, engage in creation and destruction, granting humans knowledge while embroiling them in their conflicts. Once more, the pattern emerges, divine beings acting as both benefactors and warriors, shaping human destiny while pursuing their own rivalries. In Africa, the Dogon people preserve traditions that astonish with their detail. For centuries, they have described the star Sirius as a binary system, with an invisible companion star orbiting it, knowledge only confirmed by modern astronomy in the 20th century. The Dogon say this knowledge was given to them by amphibian-like beings who came from Sirius, descending to teach the ways of agriculture and cosmology. To skeptics, the Dogon must have absorbed this knowledge through contact with modern astronomers. Yet accounts of their lore predate such contact, raising questions about how such precise astronomical data entered their traditions. Within the Anunnaki narrative, the Dogon represent another echo of the same phenomenon: celestial visitors who arrived, imparted knowledge, and were remembered as gods. Even in Polynesia, myths tell of sky canoes, vessels descending from the heavens, bringing teachers who guided navigation across vast oceans. In Native American traditions, star people appear, interacting with tribes, shaping their legends. The Hopi speak of the Kachinas, spiritual beings from the stars who instructed humanity. The Lakota tell of white buffalo calf woman, descending with sacred wisdom. Each story, viewed in isolation, might be explained as metaphor. Yet together, they form a tapestry of astonishing consistency. Across continents and millennia, humanity has remembered beings of the sky who arrived, guided, and departed. Whether these are coincidences of imagination or fragments of real encounters, the resonance is undeniable. The flood narrative is perhaps the most universal. From Mesopotamia's Atrahasis and Gilgamesh to the biblical Noah, from the Indian Manu to flood stories among the Inca and the Maori, cultures everywhere recall a deluge that destroyed the world. Some scholars argue this reflects memory of rising seas after the Ice Age, a trauma encoded into myth. Others suggest it symbolizes purification, the cyclical destruction and renewal of life. But in the Anunnaki context, the flood is not natural but deliberate, decreed by gods weary of humanity's noise and rebellion. Only those warned by sympathetic figures survive, preserving fragments of knowledge to rebuild. The recurrence of this story across cultures strengthens the possibility that it is more than allegory, that some catastrophic event truly reshaped early human memory, leaving behind the impression of divine judgment or cosmic intervention. The universality of these myths does not prove the reality of the Anunnaki, but it sharpens the question. If humanity invented gods, why did we invent the same kind of gods in so many different places? Why do sky beings, hybrid rulers, celestial wars, and floods appear everywhere? One answer is that these are archetypes, patterns born of the human psyche, reflections of our fears and aspirations. Another is that they are cultural memories of real events, refracted through language and ritual. If the Anunnaki were real, then they were not confined to Mesopotamia. Their influence reached across the globe, remembered under countless names. If they were not real, then the consistency of the myths still tells us something profound, that humanity has always sensed its story is not isolated, that our destiny is bound to the stars. In either case, the myths endure because they resonate with something deep within us. They remind us that we are not only creatures of the earth, but beings who look upward, who sense that our origins and our future may be written in the sky. The Anunnaki stand at the threshold of this mystery, embodiments of a possibility we cannot entirely dismiss. Were they gods, aliens, or archetypes? Perhaps they were all of these at once, depending on how we read the stories. But as long as the pyramids rise, the ziggurats crumble, and the stars wheel overhead, their presence lingers, challenging us to ask what our ancestors saw when they looked upward and whispered of beings who came down to shape the world. When we trace the myths of the Anunnaki into the lives of ordinary people in ancient Mesopotamia, the stories cease to be abstract legends and begin to resemble lived reality. To the farmer sowing barley, to the potter shaping clay, to the merchant bartering in the marketplace, the presence of these divine figures was not distant. It shaped their days, guided their rituals, and defined the rhythm of life. The gods were not ethereal, but embodied, their personalities woven into the cycles of agriculture, weather, and war. Enlil's storms were felt in the wind that flattened fields, while Inanna's passions were mirrored in the city's festivals, full of music, dancing, and intoxicating drink. Each action was both human and divine, each outcome shaped by forces beyond mortal control. The Anunnaki, whether they walked the earth or lingered in the sky, were never far away, their will expressed in every harvest, every treaty, every sickness and cure. In this way, mythology functioned not only as explanation, but as social order. Priests interpreted omens in the entrails of animals, in the patterns of stars, in the direction of bird flights. Their pronouncements guided kings, determined battles, and soothed fears. These rituals may seem strange now, but they reveal a world view in which every sign was a message, every event part of a cosmic dialogue. If the Anunnaki were real beings, such rituals could have been the memory of actual communication, attempts to interpret instructions from rulers who once stood in flesh before them, but later withdrew, leaving only fragments of signs and symbols. If they were imagined, then the rituals still served to anchor society, reinforcing the idea that authority descended from the heavens. Festivals brought this worldview to life. The Akitu, the New Year festival of Babylon, was one of the grandest, lasting 12 days, and reenacting the creation epic. Priests recited the Enuma Elish, reminding the people that Marduk had defeated chaos and organized the universe. The king was stripped of his regalia, humbled before the god's statue, then reinstated to symbolize divine approval of his rule. To the people, this was no mere pageant. It was a renewal of cosmic order, proof that the Anunnaki still sanctioned their world. The statues, adorned in gold and precious stones, were believed to be living presences. They were paraded through the streets, seated in boats, carried in chariots, treated as honored guests. Behind this devotion lay a conviction that the gods were not abstractions, but tangible rulers, beings who might at any moment intervene in human affairs. Such intimacy with the divine raises questions. If the Anunnaki were products of imagination, why were they given such specific rituals, meals, and dwellings? Why did humans believe they required clothing, food, and music? These details suggest memory of beings who truly lived among them, who ate and drank, who demanded offerings not as metaphor, but as sustenance. The myths describe the gods feasting on roasted meat, drinking beer, and reclining on couches, behaviors that seem curiously physical for entities of pure spirit. Perhaps this anthropomorphism was symbolic, but perhaps it was literal, the echo of interactions with beings of flesh who demanded tribute. The flood narrative again reveals this physicality. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, after Utnapishtim survives the deluge and offers a sacrifice, the gods are described as swarming over the smoke like flies. It is an odd image for divinities, but a natural one for hungry beings drawn to food. Scholars interpret it as metaphor, yet the description resonates with something tangible. Creatures needing sustenance, rejoicing at the return of offerings after catastrophe. This blend of divinity and physical hunger complicates our understanding of the Anunnaki. If they were real, they were not ethereal immortals, but embodied travelers, subject to needs and desires as humans are. If they were myth, then the ancients imagined their gods as startlingly close to human life, far more immediate than the distant deity of later religions. The daily labor of humanity was bound to these beings. The Atrahasis epic describes humans created to bear the burden of work, to dig canals, raise crops, and provide offerings. In this role, they were servants, even slaves, a race fashioned to ease divine toil. Yet the relationship was not entirely one of domination. In myths, gods also protect, guide, and even grieve for humans. Inanna weeps for her city. Enki bends rules to save mortals from extinction. These contradictions mirror the complexities of any ruling power, both exploiter and guardian, both oppressor and benefactor. Humanity lived in this tension, both grateful and fearful, both dependent and resentful. It is perhaps why myths portray humans at times rebelling, growing noisy, resisting their creators. In this tension lies the heart of our species' struggle with authority, whether divine, political, or cosmic. Archaeology reveals glimpses of how seriously these beliefs were taken. Excavations in Mesopotamian temples uncover layers of offerings, food remains, libation vessels, musical instruments. These were not symbolic gestures. They were repeated acts of devotion carried out daily by priests. Records detail how many sheep were slaughtered for the gods, how much beer was brewed, how many loaves of bread were baked. The gods, it seems, had hearty appetites, demanding the best of human labor. To modern readers, this is evidence of ritual economy, sustaining priesthoods and temples. But in the Anunnaki framework, it is the residue of actual tribute to beings who once stood present, who required these offerings in reality, not symbol. The scale of devotion suggests that whether or not the gods were real, the people believed utterly in their reality. One cannot ignore the role of fear in this system. The Anunnaki were not gentle overseers. They punished rebellion with plagues, droughts, floods. They decreed destinies with finality. To displease them was to risk ruin. Yet fear was mingled with awe, and awe with dependence. Humanity had no choice but to serve, for the gods controlled fertility of land, stability of rivers, success in battle. This dependence echoes in later religions, where obedience to divine will ensures blessing, and disobedience brings wrath. The pattern, first traced in Mesopotamia, would shape theology for millennia. If the Anunnaki were real, they established a template of control through fear and reward. If imagined, then humanity projected onto the heavens the realities of kingship, encoding the dynamics of power into myth. Gilgamesh's story embodies this tension. As king of Uruk, he is described as 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, his lineage tied directly to gods. His strength is superhuman, his ambitions vast. Yet his mortality haunts him, driving him to seek immortality. Along his journey he encounters gods, demigods, and survivors of cataclysm, each reminding him of the gulf between human and divine. His failure to attain eternal life is humanity's failure. We are linked to the gods, yet forever bound by death. The epic, in this sense, is not just a story of one man, but of all humanity, caught between divine origins and mortal limits. If Gilgamesh was remembered as historical, perhaps he was one of those hybrids, a ruler whose extraordinary life was preserved in myth. His quest symbolizes humanity's longing for the secrets the Anunnaki withheld: immortality, resurrection, freedom from the constraints of flesh. Through festivals, rituals, myths, and epics, the presence of the Anunnaki saturated life in Mesopotamia. They were not distant figures, but immediate rulers, shaping destiny, demanding tribute, and leaving humanity to wrestle with its own role as both creation and servant. Whether these beings were real visitors or the projection of human imagination, their impact is undeniable. They gave structure to society, meaning to suffering, and grandeur to kingship. They also instilled fear, dependence, and the haunting sense that humanity's destiny was never fully its own. The ruins of their temples still stand, silent but eloquent, testifying to a world where gods were near and power descended from the sky. In the stories, they remain alive, still shaping our questions, still challenging us to wonder whether the figures who walked with our ancestors were only dreams, or whether they were as real as the clay tablets that carry their names. To step further into the shadowed corridors of ancient memory, one must confront the question of technology. The myths of Mesopotamia, like those of many cultures, describe devices and abilities that do not fit easily into the picture of a Bronze Age society. They speak of weapons that roar like storms, of nets of lightning, of boats that soar through the heavens, of tablets inscribed with the very destinies of the world. For centuries, such descriptions were read as metaphor, poetic flourishes meant to convey divine power. Yet in the modern imagination, they have taken on another possibility. What if these were literal observations, recorded with the vocabulary available at the time? If the Anunnaki were truly visitors equipped with advanced tools, then the images of blazing chariots, shining discs, and thunderous weapons may be fragments of eyewitness testimony, rendered in the only language that could make sense of them. Consider the word shems, often translated as names or monuments in Sumerian texts. In certain contexts, however, it seems to mean something that allows flight, something in which gods ascend to the heavens. A hymn to Inanna describes her traveling in a shems that rises like the moon, an image that calls to mind a glowing craft rather than a carved pillar. Another text describes kings seeking permission to set up a shem, as though it were both a marker of fame and a vessel of power. The dual meaning invites speculation. Were the ancients describing technological artifacts, flying vehicles mistaken for divine instruments? Or was this entirely symbolic, a poetic way to speak of honor and legacy? The ambiguity remains, but for those who read the myths as history cloaked in allegory, the shems are perhaps the clearest hint of machines that bridged earth and sky. The tablets of destinies offer another tantalizing puzzle. These objects appear repeatedly in Mesopotamian myths as artifacts that control authority and order. Whoever holds them has the right to rule, the power to determine fate. When they are stolen, chaos spreads. When restored, the cosmos is once again aligned. In the Enuma Elish, the dragon Tiamat grants them to Kingu, arming him against the younger gods. In other texts, Enlil is the rightful keeper of the tablets, ruling from his temple at Nippur. Scholars interpret them as symbols of divine kingship, the charter of authority. But one cannot ignore the vivid descriptions, glowing, inscribed, unalterable, filled with power. In modern terms, they sound uncannily like records or devices containing information, perhaps technology beyond the comprehension of ancient scribes. If so, then myths of battles over the tablets may preserve memories of conflicts, not just for symbolic authority, but for control over actual objects of power. Weapons described in the myths also carry this aura of advanced technology. When Ninurta, the warrior god, battles Asag, a monstrous being, he wields a weapon described as roaring, hurling stones with fire, shattering mountains. When Marduk fights Tiamat, he unleashes arrows that split her belly, nets that bind her limbs, and winds that hold her down. To ancient readers, these were metaphors for storm and battle. To modern eyes, they evoke artillery, energy weapons, explosives. The language of myth filters the image, but the core impression is of destructive power far beyond swords and spears. If the Anunnaki possessed technology advanced enough to appear magical, then such descriptions may be literal, attempts to capture the awe of forces humanity had never seen before. Architecture itself may encode the memory of technology. The ziggurats, with their massive platforms and ascending staircases, were often aligned with celestial bodies. Their summits contained sanctuaries, sometimes described as resting places for divine vehicles. In Babylon, the ziggurat Etemenanki was called the House of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. Some suggest these were not merely temples, but functional sites, places where gods descended, where contact between heaven and earth was maintained. The Tower of Babel story, later retold in the Bible, echoes this image. Humans building a tower to reach the heavens, only to be scattered by divine decree. In the Anunnaki framework, this becomes not a story of human pride, but of forbidden technology. A moment when humanity sought to replicate what the gods possessed. only to be halted before they could succeed. The fascination with flight appears again and again. In myths, gods traverse the skies in chariots drawn by animals, yet the descriptions often slip into images that suggest machines rather than carriages. Flames burst forth, thunder follows, winds roar. In one hymn, Inanna's journey to the underworld is preceded by her descent on the wings of the storm. To the ancient poet, these were metaphors for divine movement, but to us they resemble the imagery of engines, of propulsion, of crafts blazing through the atmosphere. In India, the Vimanas described in the epics are even more explicit. Machines with wheels of fire, capable of traversing vast distances, waging aerial battles. When compared with Mesopotamian shems and winged discs, the parallels are striking. Across cultures, the gods are remembered not only as rulers but as pilots, their power expressed in the ability to conquer the sky. Even the manipulation of life itself appears in the myths as a form of technology. The creation of humanity in the Atrahasis epic is described with startling detail. Clay mixed with the flesh and blood of a slain god, kneaded in a womb, and born as a new race. The process is overseen by Nintu, the birth goddess, who acts almost like a laboratory technician. She sets up 14 birth goddesses, 7 on the right and 7 on the left, to create male and female humans. The precision of numbers, the combination of substances, the orchestration of birth, all sound curiously procedural, as though describing an experiment. Scholars view this as symbolic, a mythic dramatization of creation. Yet to modern ears, it carries echoes of genetic engineering, of deliberate modification. If the Anunnaki were real, this may have been their greatest technology, the shaping of a new species to serve their needs. Modern science has added fuel to such speculation. The discovery of junk DNA, vast stretches of genetic code with no apparent function, has led some to wonder whether these are remnants of manipulation, leftover fragments from an ancient experiment. Others note the sudden leap in human development, the rapid emergence of symbolic thought and culture, as though evolution were nudged forward. These are controversial ideas, but they resonate with the myths, which insist humanity was fashioned suddenly, intentionally, not by slow chance, but by design. Whether or not one believes in the Anunnaki, the convergence of myth and genetic mystery is difficult to dismiss entirely. Technology, then, becomes the lens through which the Anunnaki hypothesis interprets the myths. The gods are not spirits, but engineers, their miracles the applications of advanced science. Temples are not only shrines, but control centers, ziggurats not only symbols, but launch platforms. Tablets are not only stories, but devices of power. The line between myth and machine blurs, and in that blur we glimpse a possibility that both excites and unsettles, that the stories of the gods are not fantasies, but memories of encounters with beings whose technology was so advanced that ancient humans could only describe it in the language of thunder and flame. Yet even if we set aside the literal interpretation, the myths still testify to humanity's awareness of technology as power. To control the sky, to harness fire, to command the forces of nature, these are abilities humanity longed for, and in the Anunnaki they imagined figures who possessed them. Whether real or imagined, the gods embodied the possibility of transcendence through tools and knowledge. And in this sense, the myths remain profoundly relevant. They remind us that from our earliest days, we have equated power with technology, authority with knowledge, divinity with the mastery of forces beyond ordinary reach. The Anunnaki, then, are not only figures of the past, but mirrors of our own present, reflecting the awe and fear with which we approach our own machines, our own creations, our own attempts to become as gods. The notion of cosmic conflict threads through the stories of the Anunnaki like a dark undercurrent, hinting that the gods were not united in purpose, but divided by rivalry and ambition. In Mesopotamian myth, battles among the gods often mirror the struggles of kings on earth, with alliances formed, rebellions crushed, and destinies rewritten. At the heart of these tales is the sense that power is never stable, always contested, even among beings thought to be divine. When we read of Enlil decreeing floods to silence humanity, of Enki subverting his brother's plans to preserve life, or of Inanna waging wars to extend her dominion, we are reminded less of serene deities and more of political factions locked in ceaseless competition. This is not the portrait of omnipotent gods, but of rulers with flaws, their conflicts spilling into the world of mortals who served as their pawns. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, dramatizes this conflict on a cosmic scale. In it, the younger gods rebel against Tiamat, the primordial mother who rages against their insubordination. To quell her fury, Marduk rises as champion, armed with winds, nets, and a mighty bow. The battle is ferocious. Tiamat spews venom, her body filled with monstrous allies, while Marduk unleashes storms and lightning. At last, he pierces her with an arrow, splitting her in two, using one half to create the heavens, and the other to form the earth. The imagery is mythic, but the themes are political. Order wrested from chaos, a new ruler emerging from violent struggle. For those who see the Anunnaki as historical beings, this may encode memory of a civil war among them, with factions battling for control over Earth and its resources. The victors wrote their rule into myth, portraying themselves as saviors who tamed chaos, while the defeated were demonized as monsters. The motif of rebellion recurs in the Atrahasis epic, where the Igigi gods, weary of toil, rise against their masters. Their mutiny threatens the order of heaven, forcing the Anunnaki to create humans as replacements. Here again, the divine realm reflects human society, laborers rebelling against elites, new systems imposed to maintain control. If the Anunnaki were real, such stories may preserve echoes of actual uprisings within their ranks, conflicts over hierarchy, duty, and survival. The creation of humanity, then, may not have been a benevolent act of sharing, but a desperate measure to quell unrest, shifting the burden of work onto a new species designed to obey. Inanna, goddess of love and war, embodies the complexities of these struggles. Her myths portray her as ambitious, fearless, and unpredictable. She seeks dominion over heaven and earth, claiming the divine decrees that govern civilization, from Enki himself through cunning and charm. She descends to the underworld, challenging its queen, only to be stripped, killed, and resurrected, a cycle of defeat and renewal that mirrors the perilous nature of power. Inanna wages battles, leads armies, and demands recognition. If she were more than myth, perhaps she was a leader among the Anunnaki, striving for authority in a system dominated by male figures. Her ambition and defiance suggest that divine politics were as tangled as human courts, filled with intrigue, betrayal, and shifting allegiances. The theme of hybrid beings, born of divine and mortal unions, adds another layer to the story of conflict. In the book of Genesis, the sons of God descend to marry the daughters of men, producing the Nephilim, giants described as mighty men of old. In Mesopotamian myth, kings are often said to be part divine, their extraordinary strength and long reigns explained by their lineage. Such hybrids occupy a liminal space, both human and god, both servant and ruler. They are bridges between worlds, but also threats, embodying the potential for rebellion against their creators. Gilgamesh, described as 2/3 divine, embodies this ambiguity. His quest for immortality may reflect not only human longing, but the unstable position of hybrids, close enough to divinity to sense its promise, yet bound by mortality. For those who interpret these stories literally, hybrids were evidence of genetic experimentation, attempts by the Anunnaki to blend their traits with human adaptability. But as in all experiments, the results may have been unpredictable, producing beings too powerful, too restless, too difficult to control. Such tensions find echoes in myths beyond Mesopotamia. In Greek tradition, the Olympian gods overthrow the Titans in a cataclysmic war, casting their rivals into Tartarus. The Olympians then mingle with mortals, producing heroes like Heracles, Achilles, and Perseus, semi-divine figures whose strength and arrogance often unsettle the order of gods and men. In biblical lore, the Watchers fall from heaven, teaching humanity forbidden arts, producing giants who corrupt the earth. In Hindu epics, gods wage battles across heaven and earth, wielding weapons of dazzling destruction, while mortals caught in the crossfire struggle to survive. These stories, scattered across continents, all tell of conflict among divine beings, conflict that shapes humanity's fate. Whether allegory or memory, they reveal a vision of a cosmos where power is contested, not given, where the struggle of gods mirrors the struggle of kings and nations. The idea of cosmic war also reframes ancient monuments. Some speculate that sites like Baalbek in Lebanon, with its massive stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, may have been platforms for divine craft, built in the aftermath of battles to secure control of territory. Others suggest that the scars of ancient wars may linger in the land itself, in myths of fire from the sky, in deserts formed by unexplained cataclysms. The tale of Sodom and Gomorrah, cities destroyed by fire and brimstone, resonates with descriptions of weapons unleashing devastation from above. To modern ears, such images sound eerily like nuclear explosions, their aftermath echoing in stories of destruction so complete that only divine wrath could explain it. If the Anunnaki fought wars with advanced technology, the remnants may be hidden in plain sight, remembered not in ruins but in the myths that sought to explain the unexplainable. Yet the most haunting element of these stories is not destruction, but abandonment. The Anunnaki, after their struggles, seem to withdraw, leaving humanity to inherit the world. Kingship, once described as descending from heaven, becomes the domain of mortals. Priests maintain rituals, but the gods no longer appear in visible form. This transition suggests a final act in their drama. Having fought, created, and ruled, the Anunnaki depart, their presence fading into memory. Humanity, left behind, interprets their absence as transcendence, transforming once embodied rulers into distant deities. The conflicts of the gods become the myths of later religions, stripped of their raw politics but retaining their themes of rebellion, punishment, and salvation. If we read the myths as history, then the story of the Anunnaki is one of colonization, exploitation, rebellion, and withdrawal, a saga as messy and human as any empire. If we read them as allegory, they still reveal a profound truth: that humanity has always sensed its destiny entangled with forces greater than itself, that our struggles for power mirror a cosmic pattern. In either reading, the wars of the gods are not just ancient tales, they are reflections of our own condition. We, too, divide, rebel, seek dominance, and wage wars that scar the earth. Perhaps the myths endure because they remind us that conflict is woven into existence, that even the gods, real or imagined, could not escape it. And so, when we look at the sky and wonder whether we are alone, we are also asking whether we are still caught in that ancient conflict, heirs to struggles begun long before us. Are we free, or are we still playing roles in a drama written by beings whose footsteps echo in our earliest stories? The Anunnaki remain silent, but their myths whisper that our history may be the fragment of a larger war, one that began among the stars and left its traces in the clay of Mesopotamia. If the tales of cosmic wars and divine politics set the stage for myth, the ruins scattered across the earth provide the props, the tangible reminders of a drama we cannot fully explain. Archaeology has given us extraordinary insights into the ingenuity of ancient peoples, yet there remain structures and artifacts that strain the limits of conventional explanation. When we look at sites such as Baalbek in Lebanon, Pumapunku in Bolivia, or the Nazca Lines in Peru, we encounter works of such scale, precision, or mystery that even the most rigorous scholars admit their full story is elusive. For those who accept the Anunnaki hypothesis, these places are not merely human achievements, but footprints of a deeper presence. Traces left by beings who brought with them knowledge and technology far beyond what the societies of the time should have possessed. Baalbek is perhaps the most striking of these enigmas. In its ancient temple complex, beneath the later Roman ruins, lie megalithic stones of astonishing size. The so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman, partially quarried but never moved, weighs more than 1,000 tons. Others in the foundation walls weigh nearly as much, placed with such precision that even a knife blade cannot slip between them. The question arises: how did builders in antiquity cut, transport, and set these stones? Traditional theories invoke sledges, ramps, and sheer manpower, yet calculations show that moving such massive blocks would strain even modern cranes. To believers in the Anunnaki, Baalbek was more than a temple. It was a landing platform, a base for aerial craft, its colossal stones designed to withstand forces beyond ordinary architecture. Legends among local people long described it as a place built by giants, echoing the theme of divine or semi-divine builders. Whether one accepts the hypothesis or not, Baalbek confronts us with the unsettling reality that our ancestors accomplished feats we cannot easily replicate. Half a world away, in the high plains of Bolivia, lies Pumapunku, part of the Tiwanaku complex. Scattered across its site are stone blocks of red sandstone and andesite, cut with geometric precision that defies simple explanation. Some weigh more than 100 tons, yet the cuts are so exact that the stones fit together like pieces of a machine. The blocks feature interlocking grooves and drilled holes, suggesting a level of craftsmanship more akin to industrial fabrication than to Bronze Age tools. Local traditions claim the site was built by gods in a single night, a story dismissed as folklore, yet resonant in the light of its mystery. To adherents of the Anunnaki narrative, Pumapunku stands as evidence of advanced technology, laser-like cutting, unknown lifting devices, and knowledge of geometry beyond the reach of its era. Archaeologists debate, suggesting lost techniques or symbolic exaggerations, but the stones remain, stubborn and silent, their precision daring us to explain them. The Nazca lines in Peru add another layer of mystery. Etched into the desert floor are vast geoglyphs, figures of animals, birds, and abstract shapes, some stretching hundreds of feet, visible only from the sky. The purpose of these lines has been debated: ritual pathways, astronomical calendars, messages to the gods. Yet their scale raises questions. Why design images so large that no human on the ground could ever fully perceive them? To those who embrace the Anunnaki story, the answer lies in perspective. The lines were intended for eyes in the sky, markers for aerial beings who observed from above. The desert, flat and dry, preserves these figures for millennia, like a message left for watchers in the heavens. Mainstream scholars argue for ritual and symbolic meanings, but the fact remains. The Nazca people created works that only make sense when viewed from above, as though they were already in conversation with the sky. Other sites join this chorus of enigmas. In Egypt, the precision of the Great Pyramid's alignment to true north, within a fraction of a degree, remains extraordinary. The stones of its core, weighing tons, were transported and placed with astonishing accuracy. The internal shafts align with stars, embedding celestial knowledge into architecture. In Lebanon, legends of Solomon's temple describe beings who aided its construction, wielding powers beyond human skill. In Mesopotamia itself, ziggurats rose as stairways to heaven, their layered platforms reminiscent of engineered stages rather than simple shrines. Across the globe, we find the same themes: massive stones, perfect alignments, sky-oriented structures. Were these purely human achievements, testaments to ingenuity and devotion? Or were they collaborative works, born of instruction from teachers who came from beyond? Skeptics rightly caution against underestimating human capability. Ancient peoples were ingenious, resourceful, and motivated by devotion, survival, and ambition. They possessed mathematics, tools, and organization that allowed them to achieve marvels. Yet even the most cautious archaeologist must admit that some sites resist easy answers. The sudden leaps in precision, the persistence of sky-oriented designs, and the consistency of myths about divine builders invite speculation. For those inclined to believe in the Anunnaki, these are not coincidences, but evidence of a guiding hand. For those who doubt, they remain puzzles, urging us to expand our respect for ancient innovation. Legends surrounding these sites often reinforce the sense of otherworldly involvement. At Baalbek, stories of giants and gods abound. In the Andes, myths speak of Viracocha, a bearded god who brought civilization, taught arts, and then departed across the sea. In Egypt, the pyramids were linked to Thoth and Osiris, deities of knowledge and resurrection. In Sumer, temples were houses of heaven, dwelling places where gods descended. The mythology and the architecture together create a pattern. Human hands may have built, but they built in service of beings who claimed the sky. Even in modern times, some researchers suggest that traces of ancient catastrophes, such as vitrified stone, layers of melted sand, or unusual radiation, hint at energies unleashed far beyond primitive fire. While mainstream science often attributes these to natural events, those who see the Anunnaki hand detect echoes of ancient wars or technologies. A story like that of Sodom and Gomorrah, cities obliterated in a storm of fire, may preserve the memory of weapons wielded by beings with terrible power. Whether myth or history, such accounts resonate with the physical enigmas we find in stone and desert. What unites these mysteries is their silence. Stones do not speak, lines do not explain themselves. We can measure, analyze, and theorize, but the ultimate answers remain elusive. Yet their very existence forces us to grapple with possibilities. If humanity created these wonders alone, then our ancestors were geniuses of staggering magnitude, deserving reverence. If they did not act alone, then we are heirs to a story much larger than ourselves, a story in which our first cities and monuments were shaped by collaboration with beings we later called gods. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between. Perhaps human ambition and labor achieved more than we imagine, but under the influence of myths, teachings, or direct encounters with figures who seemed divine. The ruins are canvases upon which we project our theories, whether scientific or speculative. But regardless of interpretation, they speak to a universal fact. From the dawn of civilization, humanity has built not just for shelter or survival, but to reach upward, to connect with the sky, to embody in stone the sense that we are not alone. In this, whether or not the Anunnaki existed, their spirit lives on in the monuments we still marvel at, testaments to the ancient marriage of earth and heaven. As civilizations rose and fell, the stories of the Anunnaki did not vanish. They transformed, absorbed into new religions, philosophies, and traditions. When the great cities of Mesopotamia declined and Babylon yielded to Persia, when Persia gave way to Greece and Rome, the ancient myths traveled like seeds on the wind, sprouting in new soil. Their names changed, their roles shifted, but the essence of their presence, the idea of powerful beings descending from the heavens, shaping human destiny, punishing rebellion, and promising wisdom, echoed through the scriptures and rituals of later faiths. To trace these echoes is to uncover a hidden genealogy of belief, a line that stretches from clay tablets to sacred texts still revered today. In the Hebrew Bible, fragments of Mesopotamian myth resurface with striking clarity. The story of the flood in Genesis, with Noah building an ark at divine instruction, mirrors almost word for word the tale of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, who survived a deluge by constructing a massive boat. Scholars acknowledge the direct borrowing, yet within that borrowing is transformation. Where Utnapishtim's gods quarrel and contradict one another, the biblical God is singular, absolute, his judgment framed as moral rather than capricious. The memory of divine wrath survived, but it was recast in monotheistic form, reshaped to serve a new vision of cosmic order. To those who see the Anunnaki behind the myths, the flood story is evidence that memory of a real cataclysm endured, carried from Sumer into Israel, transmuted from polytheistic squabbles into the will of one sovereign deity. The tale of the Tower of Babel is another echo. In the biblical account, humans attempt to build a tower reaching heaven, only to be thwarted by God, who scatters them and confuses their languages. The image calls to mind Mesopotamian ziggurats, stairways to the sky, where gods were believed to descend. It also reflects older stories of humans aspiring to divine realms, acts the gods deemed threatening. Through the Anunnaki lens, Babel was not simply a lesson in humility, but a memory of humanity attempting to replicate the technology of the gods, perhaps constructing structures meant to launch them heavenward, only to be stopped by those who had no interest in sharing the sky. Even the enigmatic figures of the Nephilim in Genesis recall Mesopotamian hybrids. These mighty men of old, men of renown, were born when the sons of God took wives from among human women. Their description resonates with the Mesopotamian kings who were described as part divine, with Gilgamesh as the archetype. Later traditions interpreted the Nephilim as giants, terrifying beings who once roamed the earth. Within the Anunnaki framework, they are the genetic offspring of human-divine unions, experiments or accidents in the mixing of species, remembered as legends of extraordinary rulers and warriors. The Bible, in this light, preserves a fragment of the same story told in Mesopotamian myth, gods mingling with mortals, leaving behind children who embodied both power and tragedy. Christianity, too, absorbed traces of these older myths. The fallen angels of apocryphal texts, cast out of heaven for defying divine command or for consorting with humans, bear resemblance to the rebellious Igigi, or the Watchers of Mesopotamian lore. The Book of Enoch, excluded from the biblical canon but influential in early Jewish and Christian thought, expands on these figures, describing how they descended, taught humanity arts of metalworking, enchantments, and astrology, and corrupted the earth. The parallels to Enki, who taught humans knowledge forbidden by Enlil, are striking. The pattern is the same. Divine beings divided in purpose, some offering wisdom, others punishing it. Humanity caught in the middle. Christianity reframed this tension as a cosmic struggle between God and Satan, but the archetype had already been set in the clay of Sumer. In Gnosticism, a mystical movement of the early centuries of the Common Era, the echoes become more pronounced. Gnostic texts describe a flawed creator, the demiurge, who fashioned the material world and enslaved souls within it. Above him lies a higher hidden God, the source of true light. Humanity's task is to awaken, to reclaim its divine spark, and escape the prison of matter. This cosmology resonates with Mesopotamian myths of humanity created to serve, bound by toil, and longing for freedom. The demiurge resembles the harsh figures of Enlil, demanding obedience and punishing rebellion, while the hidden god mirrors the more benevolent Enki, whispering secrets that offer salvation. Gnosticism, with its dualistic worldview, may thus preserve the memory of divided gods, reframed as metaphysical principles. Even Islam carries traces of these older patterns. The Quran speaks of Iblis, a being who refused to bow to Adam, cast out for his pride. The story mirrors the rebellious figures in Mesopotamian lore, divine beings resisting the elevation of humanity. The Quran also describes jinn, beings of smokeless fire who live parallel to humans, capable of influencing them, sometimes benevolent, sometimes malicious. Their ambiguity recalls the complex personalities of the Anunnaki, neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but powerful, capricious, and deeply entangled with human fate. Philosophy, too, absorbed these echoes. When Greek thinkers encountered Mesopotamian traditions through conquest and trade, they reinterpreted them in rational terms. Plato's story of Atlantis, a great civilization destroyed by divine wrath, resembles the flood narratives. His theory of demiurges, cosmic craftsman shaping the universe, resonates with the role of gods like Enki, who fashioned humanity and established laws. The Stoics, with their emphasis on fate inscribed in the order of the cosmos, recall the Mesopotamian tablets of destinies, where divine decrees fixed the pattern of existence. Even in rational philosophy, the fingerprints of the Anunnaki remain, disguised as metaphors but carrying the same structure. Powerful forces beyond human control, shaping the destiny of the world. The continuity of these myths across religions suggests that the Anunnaki, whether real or symbolic, left an indelible mark on the human psyche. Their roles shifted with cultural needs. In Mesopotamia, they were gods among men. In Israel, they became angels or fallen beings. In Christianity, demons or rebels. In Gnosticism, flawed creators. In Islam, jinn and tempters. Each tradition reshaped them to fit its theology, but the core remained: themes of creation, rebellion, judgment, and hidden knowledge. Humanity never fully forgot the beings who once walked in their stories, even if their names were changed and their deeds reinterpreted. What this continuity reveals is not only the persistence of myth, but also the hunger for explanation. Our ancestors looked at the ruins of their past, at the mysteries of their origin, and wove stories that carried forward into every new culture. The Anunnaki may have been flesh and blood rulers, or they may have been projections of human fears and hopes, but in either case, they became templates for divine figures across the world. Their legacy is not only in temples and tablets, but in the scriptures still read by billions, the philosophies still studied, the rituals still performed. To explore the Anunnaki is therefore not just to wander in ancient Mesopotamia, but to recognize how their shadow stretches across millennia, shaping even the faiths that claim to have left polytheism behind. The transformation of gods into angels, demons, creators, and tempters is a reminder that history is not a straight line, but a palimpsest, each layer written over the last but never fully erasing it. Beneath the words of holy texts, beneath the logic of philosophy, beneath the prayers of believers, the ancient voices of Sumer still murmur, whispering of beings who descended from the sky, bestowed gifts, demanded service, and departed, leaving humanity to puzzle over their memory. Whether one interprets them as aliens, archetypes, or metaphors, their story is our story, their struggles our struggles, their mysteries the seed of every religion that followed. As the myths of the Anunnaki filtered into mainstream religions, they also took on subtler, hidden lives within traditions that preferred secrecy to open proclamation. Mystery schools, secret brotherhoods, and later alchemical societies carried fragments of ancient lore, guarding them as if they were keys to truths too dangerous for the uninitiated. While public religions emphasized obedience, faith, and communal ritual, these esoteric paths whispered of hidden knowledge, of secret powers, of origins not fully explained by official doctrine. In these whispers, the shadow of the Anunnaki persisted, reframed not as gods to worship, but as forces to understand, masters of knowledge whose legacy could still be accessed by those bold enough to seek it. The Egyptian mysteries are a prime example. Long after the ziggurats of Mesopotamia had crumbled, the temples of Egypt kept alive rituals of initiation that promised communion with higher beings. The cult of Osiris reenacted death and resurrection, guiding initiates through symbolic journeys meant to unlock hidden wisdom. Behind the pageantry lay a deeper idea. that humanity could transcend mortality by recovering secrets once given by divine teachers. The priests of Thoth, god of wisdom, preserved texts describing mathematics, astronomy, and alchemy. To many, Thoth is simply a cultural figure, but to those who read history through the lens of the Anunnaki, he is the Egyptian echo of Enki, the god who defied his peers to share knowledge with humanity. The mysteries of Egypt, then, may have been a continuation of older Mesopotamian teachings, repackaged in the language of pyramids and hieroglyphs. The Greeks inherited this mantle, adapting Egyptian and Mesopotamian lore into their own mystery schools. The Eleusinian mysteries, devoted to Demeter and Persephone, promised initiates a vision of life beyond death, a secret knowledge hidden from the masses. While these rites focused on agricultural cycles and the soul's rebirth, their structure, secrecy, initiation, hidden wisdom, mirrors the older pattern of divine-human relationships. The Orphic traditions, too, spoke of a primordial god torn apart and reborn, echoing the violent myths of Tiamat and Marduk. In these rituals, the gods were no longer external rulers but inner archetypes, yet the hunger for secret knowledge persisted, the same hunger that once drove priests to guard the me, the decrees of civilization, as treasures bestowed by the Anunnaki. With the rise of Hellenistic culture, the blending of Greek, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian traditions produced Hermeticism, a body of teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a fusion of Thoth and Mercury. The Hermetic texts speak of the universe as a living whole, of hidden correspondences between heaven and earth, of the possibility for humans to ascend and reclaim divine wisdom. The refrain, as above, so below, is their hallmark, echoing the Mesopotamian vision of temples as earthly mirrors of the heavens. Within these texts, we find direct references to beings who descended to teach humanity, echoes of ancient teachers recast as cosmic intelligences. Hermeticism, while couched in philosophy, preserves the structure of the old myths. Knowledge withheld, initiates chosen, ascent to the divine through mastery of secret wisdom. Alchemy, often dismissed as a pseudoscience, also carries this legacy. On the surface, alchemy was about turning base metals into gold, but at its core, it was about transformation, of matter, of soul, of destiny. Alchemists spoke of the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that could grant immortality and ultimate wisdom. The search for this stone parallels the quest of Gilgamesh, who sought the plant of eternal life, only to have it stolen by a serpent. In both, the promise is the same, that divine knowledge can free humanity from the constraints of mortality. Alchemists often wrote in coded symbols, not only to guard their secrets from authorities, but because they believed they were dealing with truths too powerful for the unprepared. Some traced their art back to Hermes Trismegistus, others to Solomon, still others to even more ancient sages. To those who see the hand of the Anunnaki, alchemy was the survival of their teachings, a distorted but enduring attempt to replicate the powers once wielded by gods: control of matter, extension of life, transformation of being. Secret societies of later centuries inherited these fragments and added their own layers of symbolism. The Freemasons, with their emphasis on architecture, geometry, and hidden rites, claim descent from builders of Solomon's temple, but some suggest their symbols reach back to ziggurats and pyramids, to the original temples where gods and men met. Their compass and square recall not only the tools of builders, but the cosmic order laid out by the Anunnaki, who measured the heavens and inscribed destinies on tablets. The Rosicrucians, with their mystical manifestos, spoke of hidden masters guiding humanity, teachers who appear in times of need to restore wisdom. These hidden masters resemble nothing so much as the absent gods of Mesopotamia, who once walked among men but withdrew, leaving behind only whispers. Even in modern esoteric movements, from theosophy to New Age spirituality, the theme returns. Helena Blavatsky wrote of ascended masters, beings of immense knowledge guiding humanity from hidden realms. Others speak of extraterrestrials from Sirius or Orion, teaching humanity in ancient times. Whether framed as spirits, masters, or aliens, the story is the same. Beings beyond human scale who descend, impart wisdom, and retreat, leaving humanity to puzzle over their traces. The Anunnaki, under different names, live on in these narratives, their myth adapted to the concerns of each age. What unites all these traditions is the conviction that knowledge is not equally shared, that there are secrets hidden from the masses, accessible only to the few. This conviction mirrors the Mesopotamian myths, where the me, the decrees of civilization, were guarded by gods and only reluctantly given to humans. It also mirrors the pattern of rebellion and theft, Inanna tricking Enki to gain the me, Prometheus stealing fire from Zeus, the Watchers sharing forbidden arts. In every age, humanity imagines itself as both recipient and rebel, dependent on higher beings, yet determined to seize their knowledge. Mystery schools, alchemists, and societies formalized this tension, offering paths of initiation that promised to recover what was once lost. Skeptics argue that these traditions simply recycle human longings, the fear of death, the desire for control, the hope for transcendence. And indeed they do, but the consistency of their symbols, the persistence of their structures, hints at a deeper origin. Why do so many traditions imagine hidden masters, lost wisdom, transformative stones, or secret rituals of ascent? Why do they all echo the same themes of descent, instruction, rebellion, and withdrawal? Perhaps because, at some level, they all draw from the same reservoir of myth, a reservoir that began in Mesopotamia, where the Anunnaki were first remembered. In this way, the legacy of the Anunnaki extends not only into open religion, but into hidden streams of culture, shaping the dreams of those who sought more than official doctrine. They are not worshipped directly, yet their image persists in the archetype of the hidden teacher, the forbidden knowledge, the transformative power. To explore the mysteries of Egypt, the rituals of Eleusis, the texts of Hermes, the symbols of the alchemists, is to walk through shadows cast by beings who may have once been flesh and blood, now remembered only as veiled figures guiding humanity from the margins. The persistence of secrecy itself may be the most telling sign. If there were once beings who walked among humans, sharing knowledge but withdrawing it when it threatened to destabilize their control, then secrecy would be the natural mode of preserving what remained. Those who kept the mysteries alive did so not only for their own power, but out of a sense that knowledge was dangerous, that to reveal it openly would bring chaos. Whether this fear was justified or not, it echoes the ancient drama of gods and men, of gifts given and taken away, of wisdom guarded and stolen. And so, across millennia, the secret societies and mystery schools have carried the ember of the Anunnaki flame, hidden in symbols and rituals, waiting for those who would seek it out. Long after the last ziggurats had crumbled into sand and the languages of Sumer and Akkad had fallen silent, the memory of the Anunnaki lived on in art and storytelling. Cultural imagination, ever restless, reshaped these ancient beings to fit the needs and fears of later eras. Where clay tablets once bore their names, now parchment, paint, and ink carried their echoes. Through medieval manuscripts, Renaissance allegories, Romantic poetry, and even modern novels and films, fragments of the Anunnaki story reappeared, not always under the same name, but carrying the same aura of mystery and awe. In this way, the legacy of the gods of Mesopotamia seeped into global culture, shaping visions of power, transcendence, and cosmic origin. Medieval Europe, though formally devoted to Christian cosmology, preserved many threads of older myth. Illuminated manuscripts depicted angels and demons locked in combat, their forms strikingly similar to Mesopotamian winged beings. In the margins of texts, monstrous hybrids peered out, giants, half-human creatures, and figures wielding strange tools. While these images were filtered through the lens of Christian theology, their resemblance to the themes of the Anunnaki is unmistakable. Celestial beings descending, shaping destinies, producing hybrids both feared and revered. Tales of fallen angels who taught sorcery, described in apocryphal works like the Book of Enoch, circulated among monks and mystics, keeping alive the archetype of divine rebels whose gifts to humanity were both blessing and curse. The Renaissance, with its revival of classical antiquity, brought renewed fascination with ancient myths. Artists painted gods descending from the heavens, often merging classical imagery with biblical scenes. Raphael's frescoes of winged messengers, Michelangelo's muscular figures on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, Botticelli's dreamlike visions, all reveal humanity's enduring attraction to beings who transcend ordinary limits. Scholars of the Renaissance also rediscovered Hermetic and Mesopotamian texts, preserved in Arabic translations. Suddenly, the wisdom of the ancients was not just fable, but a body of knowledge hinting at cosmic mysteries. Renaissance occultists like Marsilio Ficino and Giordano Bruno saw in these fragments proof that humanity had once been closer to the divine, guided by higher intelligences. Bruno even suggested that infinite worlds existed, inhabited by countless beings, a vision that, while condemned as heretical, echoed the ancient Sumerian conviction that the heavens were full of life. Literature, too, became a vessel for these memories. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, the war in heaven bears striking resemblance to Mesopotamian tales of divine conflict. Satan, cast out for rebellion, echoes the Igigi gods who rose against their masters, or Inanna, who defied the hierarchy of heaven. The image of celestial beings locked in endless rivalry, their battles reshaping the fate of mortals, is a direct descendant of the Anunnaki narrative. Romantic poets like William Blake and Percy Bysshe Shelley continued this fascination, portraying angels and titans as symbols of both oppression and liberation. Blake's Ancient of Days, measuring the cosmos with compasses, recalls the Mesopotamian gods who inscribed destinies, while Shelley's Prometheus, chained for giving fire to humanity, resonates with Enki's defiance in granting forbidden knowledge. As the Enlightenment shifted focus to reason, the myths were not discarded, but reinterpreted. Antiquarians began to study ruins in Mesopotamia, uncovering cuneiform tablets that brought the names of the Anunnaki back into light after centuries of obscurity. The 19th century, with its spirit of discovery, became a golden age for rediscovering Sumer. Explorers like Austin Henry Layard unearthed the palaces of Nineveh and Nimrud, their walls carved with winged figures bearing resemblance to biblical angels. When George Smith translated the Epic of Gilgamesh in the 1870s, the flood story shocked the Western world, revealing the Bible's debt to far older traditions. Newspapers declared the discovery proof that Scripture was not unique, but part of a continuum of myth stretching back to Sumer. For some, this revelation threatened faith. For others, it deepened it, suggesting that biblical stories were confirmed by archaeology. Yet for those attuned to the Anunnaki hypothesis, it was confirmation that the gods of Mesopotamia still lingered in our collective imagination, resurfacing as artifacts pulled from the earth. In the 20th century, as science fiction blossomed, the Anunnaki found new life in popular culture. Writers like H.P. Lovecraft, though not directly citing Mesopotamia, created mythologies of ancient beings who ruled the earth before humanity, beings vast, incomprehensible, and alien. His Cthulhu mythos carries clear resonances with the Anunnaki, cosmic entities who descend, enslave, and leave behind cults devoted to their return. Later authors made the connection more explicit. Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods in the 1960s argued that ancient myths of gods were actually records of extraterrestrial visitors. Though criticized by scholars, his work captured the public imagination, inspiring films, television shows, and countless debates. Suddenly, the Anunnaki were not only figures of archaeology, but icons of speculative history, woven into the fabric of UFO lore and alien contact theories. Hollywood amplified this fascination. Films like 2001, A Space Odyssey portrayed humanity's evolution as guided by mysterious extraterrestrial intelligences, echoing the Sumerian story of gods who shaped us. Stargate imagined ancient deities as alien overlords who enslaved humans and built monumental structures as symbols of control. Television series like Ancient Aliens brought these ideas to mainstream audiences, presenting the Anunnaki as recurring characters in humanity's saga, their presence hidden but persistent. While scholars dismiss such portrayals as pseudoscience, their cultural impact is undeniable. Millions now associate Mesopotamian gods with extraterrestrials, their memory fused with modern fascination with space and technology. Artistic reinterpretations continue in contemporary literature and music. Novelists blend myth and science fiction, envisioning the Anunnaki as interstellar travelers who seeded humanity. Musicians incorporate their names into lyrics, evoking mystery and rebellion. Visual artists paint winged figures descending in beams of light, half angel, half machine. In the digital age, the Anunnaki have become memes, icons circulating in online forums where ancient history, conspiracy theories, and pop culture intermingle. Whether serious or ironic, these portrayals ensure that the gods of Mesopotamia remain alive in the cultural imagination, their story retold for each new generation. What is most remarkable is the consistency of the themes. Whether in ancient myth, Renaissance art, romantic poetry, or modern science fiction, the Anunnaki appear as beings who descend from the sky, alter human destiny, and leave behind mysteries. Sometimes they are benefactors, sometimes tyrants, sometimes incomprehensible forces, but always they embody the tension between humanity and the divine, between dependence and rebellion, between ignorance and knowledge. This consistency suggests that their story touches something deep in human consciousness, a pattern too compelling to forget. Through art and literature, the Anunnaki have become more than ancient gods. They are archetypes, symbols of our longing to understand where we come from and who guides our path. They represent both our fear of being controlled and our hope of being taught, both the terror of cosmic indifference and the promise of cosmic wisdom. In this way, their legacy transcends archaeology and theology. It lives in brushstrokes, verses, films, and songs, in every creative act that grapples with the possibility that humanity is not alone. Whether they were real beings or mythic projections, their story continues to inspire, challenge, and unsettle, ensuring that the voices of Sumer still echo in the imagination of the modern world. In the modern age, as science expands the horizons of what we know about the cosmos and ourselves, the story of the Anunnaki has found new relevance. Where once these beings were confined to clay tablets and temple walls, now they are measured against genetics, astronomy, and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Skeptics dismiss the connections as fanciful, but even they acknowledge the curious resonance. Ancient myths describing beings from the heavens align uncannily with questions modern science now asks. Are we alone? How did human intelligence arise so quickly? Could life have been seeded from the stars? Each of these inquiries circles back to themes the Sumerians recorded thousands of years ago, suggesting that whether the Anunnaki were real or symbolic, their story anticipated debates that still define our search for truth. Genetics is one of the most compelling arenas in which the Anunnaki narrative collides with science. The human genome, sequenced at the dawn of the 21st century, revealed not only the complexity of our DNA, but also its mysteries. Vast stretches of so-called junk DNA, once thought meaningless, remain poorly understood, their function elusive. Some researchers have speculated that these regions may carry hidden regulatory codes, others that they are remnants of evolutionary experiments. For proponents of the Anunnaki theory, this is fertile ground. Could these fragments be evidence of ancient manipulation, traces of genetic engineering performed to create or enhance humanity? The Atrahasis epic describes gods mixing clay with divine essence to fashion humans, while modern science speaks of gene splicing and CRISPR. The language differs, but the underlying idea, that humanity was shaped intentionally, not solely by chance, bridges myth and science. Mitochondrial DNA studies suggest that modern humans share a common maternal ancestor dating back roughly 200,000 years. This so-called mitochondrial Eve aligns uncannily with the time frame when Homo sapiens emerged fully formed, with language, culture, and symbolic thought. Mainstream anthropology attributes this leap to natural evolution, perhaps triggered by genetic mutations or environmental pressures. Yet the suddenness of the shift, compared to the slow crawl of earlier hominid development, has puzzled scholars. Could it be, as the Anunnaki story suggests, that this leap was guided, that a species was accelerated into intelligence for purposes beyond its own survival? It is a controversial idea, yet one that continues to intrigue both scientists and laypeople, precisely because it addresses the mystery of our rapid cognitive awakening. Astronomy, too, provides a stage where ancient myth meets modern curiosity. The Sumerians described a detailed cosmos with planets aligned in order, cycles tracked with astonishing precision, and references to a 12th body, Nibiru, whose orbit carried it far from the Sun. While mainstream scholars debate whether Nibiru was a mythic construct or a misunderstanding of the heavens, the idea of hidden planets has not disappeared. In recent years, astronomers have speculated about Planet 9, a massive body that may exist in the outer reaches of our solar system, its presence inferred from the gravitational pull on distant objects. Though no direct evidence has yet been found, the possibility reopens a question first raised in Mesopotamia. Could there be unseen members of our solar family, perhaps even the original home of visitors remembered as the Anunnaki? The search for extraterrestrial life, once confined to speculation, is now a serious scientific endeavor. NASA missions probe Mars for evidence of microbial life, telescopes scan exoplanets for habitable conditions, and radio arrays listen for signals from distant stars. Each discovery, from water on Enceladus to Earth-like planets orbiting red dwarfs, fuels the possibility that life is not unique to Earth. For most scientists, this is a matter of probability and chemistry. For those attuned to the Anunnaki narrative, it is also a matter of history. If beings visited long ago, then the universe may already be full of civilizations, some of which have touched ours. Ancient myths of gods descending from the sky take on a startling literalness when placed against modern discussions of interstellar travel and panspermia. The theory that life spreads through the cosmos via comets and asteroids. The concept of panspermia, once fringe, has gained cautious acceptance among scientists exploring how life may have arisen on Earth. Some propose that the building blocks of DNA arrived from space, seeded by comets rich in organic molecules. Others suggest that microbial life itself could survive interstellar journeys, carried from one world to another. If so, then humanity's origins are indeed cosmic, not confined to a single planet. To the Anunnaki hypothesis, this is more than coincidence. It is confirmation of what the ancients claimed, that life was gifted, transplanted, or guided by beings from beyond. Whether through natural processes or intentional design, the idea that our roots stretch to the stars unites myth and science in a way that feels both ancient and revolutionary. Technology itself now echoes the myths. Artificial intelligence, genetic editing, and space exploration place humanity in the role once occupied by the Anunnaki. We now manipulate genomes, create hybrids in laboratories, and send machines beyond our planet. Our telescopes peer farther than any priest astronomer of Sumer could have dreamed. And our rockets mirror the chariots of the gods, once described in hymns. In striving for mastery of life and cosmos, we find ourselves becoming the very beings our ancestors imagined, creators, explorers, potential colonizers of other worlds. Perhaps the myths were not records of the past, but premonitions of the future, images of what humanity itself would one day achieve. Or perhaps they were records of others who already walked this path, long before us. Still, skepticism remains essential. Science demands evidence, not allegory, and no cuneiform tablet can substitute for empirical data. Genetic anomalies may be the product of evolution, not intervention. Hidden planets may exist, but they are not necessarily the homes of gods. The search for extraterrestrials continues, but so far it has yielded silence. Yet even skeptics acknowledge the power of myth to shape inquiry. Many astronomers were drawn to their field by stories of life beyond Earth, many geneticists by the mystery of what makes us human. The Anunnaki may not be testable hypotheses, but their story continues to inspire questions that push the boundaries of science. In this way, myth and science do not stand opposed, but entwined. Myth provides the narrative that stirs curiosity, the archetype that demands exploration. Science provides the tools to test, refine, and expand. The story of the Anunnaki, whether literal or symbolic, has thus become part of the great dialogue between imagination and discovery. It reminds us that the questions we ask today are not new. They are the same questions whispered in temples 5,000 years ago. Who are we? Where did we come from? Are we alone? And are there beings who know more than we do, watching from the heavens? As telescopes sharpen, as DNA unfolds its secrets, as rockets pierce the atmosphere, the ancient voices grow louder, not fainter. The Sumerians looked upward and saw gods descending. We look upward and see galaxies filled with possibility. Between their vision and ours lies a bridge of mystery, one that may one day reveal that the Anunnaki were not merely myths, but messengers, harbingers of a truth humanity is only now prepared to face. Until then, their story remains a mirror in which science glimpses its own reflection, a reminder that the boundary between myth and discovery is thinner than we dare admit. Beneath the surface of history and science, the story of the Anunnaki lives on in a more intimate realm, the human psyche. Myths do not endure for millennia unless they touch something deep within us, something that reason alone cannot erase. Even when stripped of their literal form, the Anunnaki persist as archetypes, universal images that shape how we dream, fear, and imagine. To explore this psychological dimension is to see not only what the Anunnaki may have been in external reality, but what they represent within us, reflections of our own desires and anxieties projected onto the canvas of the cosmos. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the landscape of the collective unconscious, argued that myths and symbols emerge from shared patterns in the human mind. He called these patterns archetypes, recurring figures like the hero, the shadow, the mother, the trickster. The Anunnaki, viewed through this lens, embody several archetypes at once. They are the great parents, creators who fashion humanity. They are the rulers, imposing laws and destinies. They are also the rebels, divided among themselves, some offering forbidden knowledge. And they are the strangers, beings from beyond whose presence both terrifies and fascinates. Whether they were real beings or not, their stories give form to these archetypes, making them visible and memorable. Consider the archetype of the parent. The Anunnaki myths describe humanity as a created species, fashioned from clay and divine blood, given life to serve. This echoes the universal experience of dependence. Every child relies on parents for survival, guidance, and structure. Yet the myths also capture the darker side of this relationship. The parents who exploit, who demand obedience, who withhold freedom. The Anunnaki are not gentle caretakers but ambivalent figures, reflecting both the nurturing and oppressive aspects of authority. In this way, they mirror the human experience of growing under power that protects, but also limits, loves, but also controls. The archetype of the ruler is equally vivid. The Anunnaki sit in council, assign tasks, decree destinies. Their word shapes the world. Their disputes alter the fate of mortals. In the human psyche, this resonates with our awareness of power structures, from kings to governments, from bosses to bureaucracies. We experience rulers as distant yet decisive, their decisions shaping our lives without our consent. The Anunnaki embody this dynamic on a cosmic scale, projecting earthly hierarchies into the heavens. Their myths remind us that the need to understand and negotiate power is as old as humanity itself, encoded in our dreams as much as in our politics. The rebel archetype, too, finds fertile ground in these stories. Enki, who defies his peers to help humanity, is the prototype of the trickster, the Prometheus figure who steals fire, the Lucifer who offers forbidden fruit. Such figures embody the human impulse to question, to push beyond boundaries, to seize knowledge even when forbidden. They also embody the fear of punishment that follows, for every myth of rebellion ends with retribution. Prometheus chained, Lucifer cast out, humanity cursed with toil. In the Anunnaki myths, this tension plays out as gods divided in purpose, some strict, others sympathetic, with humanity caught in between. Psychologically, this mirrors the inner conflict between obedience and autonomy, between the safety of submission and the peril of freedom. The archetype of the stranger, perhaps the most haunting of all, gives the Anunnaki their enduring aura. They are not merely gods in human form, they are beings from beyond, outsiders whose motives are never entirely clear. They inspire awe, but also dread, for their power is immense and their plans inscrutable. In dreams and myths, the stranger often represents the unknown, the other against which identity is defined. The Anunnaki as strangers embody humanity's confrontation with the vastness of the cosmos, with forces larger than ourselves, with the unsettling possibility that we are not alone. Whether interpreted as aliens or as archetypes, they capture the psychic experience of facing what lies beyond the familiar, the comfort, the known. Jung argued that archetypes manifest not only in myths, but in dreams. People across cultures report visions of beings descending from the sky, of giants, of luminous figures teaching or commanding. In modern times, such visions appear as UFO encounters, abduction stories, and reports of alien contact. To skeptics, these are hallucinations, products of stress or cultural suggestion. To Jung, they were expressions of the same archetypes that once produced myths of gods. The flying saucer, he suggested, was a modern mandala, a symbol of wholeness projected onto the heavens, expressing humanity's longing for unity and transcendence. In this sense, UFOs and the Anunnaki are psychological cousins, different masks of the same archetypal presence. The power of archetypes lies in their ability to shape behavior. Myths of the Anunnaki have fueled not only religious beliefs, but also movements of resistance, exploration, and creativity. They inspire art, as seen in ancient carvings and modern films. They guide spiritual quests, as in mystery schools and New Age rituals. They even influence politics, as conspiracy theories recast rulers as puppets of hidden powers, a modern retelling of the old story of gods behind kings. Psychologically, the Anunnaki represent humanity's struggle to reconcile dependence and freedom, fear and curiosity, submission and rebellion. By embodying these conflicts in vivid figures, the myths allow individuals and cultures to grapple with them, to negotiate their own relationship with authority, knowledge, and the unknown. There is also the archetype of the shadow, the dark, repressed aspects of the psyche that emerge in myths as monsters or tyrants. The Anunnaki, with their cruelty, their endless wars, their exploitation of human labor, embody this shadow. They reveal the darker possibilities of power and creativity, reminding us that what gives life can also enslave, what grants knowledge can also destroy. To confront the Anunnaki is to confront the possibility that our own progress may carry hidden costs, that the gods we serve, whether literal or metaphorical, may not have our best interests at heart. This archetypal confrontation is timeless, as relevant in ancient temples as in modern boardrooms, laboratories, and governments. In this way, the Anunnaki function not only as external beings, but as mirrors of the human condition. They externalize our psychological conflicts, project them onto the heavens, and dramatize them in stories of creation, rebellion, and destiny. Whether real or symbolic, they offer a language for experiences too vast, too primal to express otherwise. They embody the archetypal patterns that underlie not only myth, but also art, religion, politics, and personal life. To explore them psychologically is to recognize that they are not only part of our past, but part of our present, woven into the very fabric of the human mind. What this suggests is that even if archaeology disproves the literal existence of the Anunnaki, their reality remains undeniable in another sense. They are real as archetypes, as psychic forces that shape how we see the world, how we relate to power, how we dream of the stars. They live in our unconscious, guiding and haunting us, inspiring and warning us. Their legacy is not confined to clay tablets, but inscribed in the architecture of the psyche itself. And as long as humanity looks upward with wonder and inward with fear, the Anunnaki will remain, not just as stories of the past, but as presences within us, forever shaping how we imagine gods, strangers, and ourselves. In the modern era, the Anunnaki myth has not remained confined to archaeology, psychology, or art. It has seeped into politics, conspiracy theories, and the contested narratives that shape how societies view power. When people whisper that rulers are puppets, that hidden elites control the world, that governments conceal knowledge of extraterrestrial contact, they are often retelling the same story that first appeared on clay tablets in Mesopotamia. The names change: politicians, bankers, monarchs, but the structure remains. Unseen powers manipulating humanity for their own ends, a drama of control and secrecy that echoes the ancient relationship between gods and mortals. One of the most persistent modern interpretations casts the Anunnaki as literal extraterrestrials who never truly left. According to this view, they continue to influence human affairs through hidden intermediaries, guiding the rise and fall of nations, economies, and technologies. The language of conspiracy merges with the imagery of myth, producing visions of shadowy cabals and bloodlines said to trace back to the ancient rulers. Some claim that royal families preserve divine ancestry, descendants of those who once walked as gods. Others point to global institutions as masks for the same old power, councils echoing the divine assembly, corporations echoing the overseers of labor, political dynasties echoing the half-divine kings. The reptilian conspiracy theory, popularized by authors like David Icke, is one of the boldest expressions of this idea. It suggests that shape-shifting beings, linked to the Anunnaki, control governments and media, manipulating humanity through deception. To skeptics, this is absurd fantasy. To believers, it is a modern retelling of the old story of gods in disguise, walking among men, their true forms hidden. The imagery of reptilian overlords may seem bizarre, but it recalls the serpents and dragons of ancient myth, symbols of power and fear. In a psychological sense, it externalizes the feeling that rulers are alien, cold-blooded, detached from the lives of ordinary people. Whether literal or metaphorical, the theory taps into the same archetype. Beings above and beyond humanity, exploiting without empathy. Conspiracies about secret bloodlines also echo the Mesopotamian theme of divine kingship. Ancient kings claimed descent from the gods to legitimize their rule. In modern times, similar narratives persist in claims that certain families hold ancient power, passed through generations, hidden from public view. The idea of dynasties stretching back to Sumer resonates with our suspicion that power is never truly democratic, that behind the appearance of change lies continuity. In this sense, the Anunnaki myth provides a template for mistrust, a way to explain why oppression and inequality persist despite revolutions and reforms. It suggests that humanity remains servants, not of gods this time, but of elites who inherited their mantle. The UFO phenomenon, too, is often framed through the Anunnaki lens. Sightings of strange craft, reports of abductions, stories of secret bases. These are interpreted by some as signs that the ancient gods have returned, monitoring their creation, experimenting on their descendants. Governments accused of covering up extraterrestrial contact are cast in the role once played by priesthoods, mediating between divine powers and the masses, withholding knowledge to preserve control. In this way, the myth adapts seamlessly to modern anxieties. Where once temples were the locus of power, now it is military complexes and scientific institutions. The suspicion remains the same, that those in authority know more than they admit, that humanity is kept in ignorance by design. Political rhetoric often reflects these archetypes without naming them. Leaders accused of acting like gods, corporations described as dehumanizing masters, surveillance systems compared to omniscient eyes, all echo the old stories of Anunnaki oversight. The fear that technology enslaves rather than liberates recalls the ancient dynamic of humans created to toil. The hope that rebels will rise, whistleblowers who defy authority, recalls Enki's defiance, Prometheus's theft. Conspiracy theories dramatize these dynamics, offering narratives where hidden powers control events, but they are also amplified by the very real concentration of wealth and authority in the hands of a few. In this way, the Anunnaki myth resonates not only because it is ancient, but because it reflects enduring truths about power and its abuses. For many, conspiracy theories fill a gap left by official narratives. When institutions fail to provide transparency, people turn to alternative explanations. The Anunnaki story offers a grand framework. History as the manipulation of humanity by higher powers, with governments as intermediaries. It explains inequality, secrecy, and suffering by placing them in a cosmic drama. While scholars criticize this as dangerous fantasy, it fulfills a psychological need for coherence, a way to make sense of chaos by linking it to patterns older than civilization itself. Not all political uses of the Anunnaki myth are paranoid. Some interpret it as a symbol of empowerment. If humanity was created to serve, then recognizing this is the first step to reclaiming freedom. If rulers descend from gods, then questioning their legitimacy becomes an act of liberation. Activists sometimes use the language of breaking chains and awakening, metaphors that echo the old myths of rebellion against divine masters. In this sense, the Anunnaki function as cautionary figures, reminders of what happens when power is unquestioned and authority deified. At the same time, the danger of such narratives is clear. When taken literally, they can breed suspicion, division, and extremism. Believing that leaders are not human, but alien overlords, can dehumanize politics, turning opponents into monsters. History shows the peril of such thinking, how myths can be weaponized to justify violence, yet dismissing the myths outright ignores their symbolic power. They speak to real feelings of alienation, exploitation, and mistrust. To understand why people turn to the Anunnaki conspiracy is to understand their lived experience of disempowerment, their sense that decisions are made in hidden chambers, their longing for transparency and justice. The persistence of these ideas suggests that the Anunnaki, whether as myth or metaphor, still serve as a mirror for society's deepest anxieties. They embody the suspicion that we are not in control, that hidden forces shape our destiny. They embody the fear that power is alien, inhuman, indifferent. They embody the hope that rebellion is possible, that knowledge can free us, that we can reclaim what was withheld. In the political theater of the modern world, they are ghosts from the ancient past, whispering that the struggles of Sumer are not so different from the struggles of today. Thus, the Anunnaki remain not only figures of myth and archaeology, but actors in the dramas of modern politics and conspiracy. They have shifted from gods to aliens, from rulers to reptiles, from priests to elites. But their role is unchanged. Symbols of power beyond reach, shaping humanity's fate. Whether one laughs at the theories or takes them seriously, the fact that they endure proves their potency. The story that began in Mesopotamia has not ended. It has merely changed costume, appearing on the stages of parliaments, in the halls of power, and in the digital spaces where suspicion thrives. Humanity still tells the same tale, that it is ruled by beings from beyond, and that freedom lies in uncovering the truth they conceal. If the political imagination has recast the Anunnaki as hidden rulers and conspirators, popular culture has made them icons, reshaping their image again and again for audiences hungry for mystery. Film, television, novels, video games, comic books, and music have all drawn on their aura, turning ancient gods into modern archetypes of alien visitors, secret masters, or guardians of lost wisdom. In this way, the Anunnaki no longer belong only to archaeologists or theorists. They have become part of the shared dreamscape of mass media, appearing on screens and pages around the world, their wings and helmets replaced by spaceships and holograms, but their essence unchanged. The golden age of science fiction in the 20th century prepared fertile ground for their rebirth. Writers like Arthur C. Clarke, though not naming the Anunnaki directly, imagined advanced beings guiding human evolution, as in 2001, A Space Odyssey. The mysterious monolith in Clarke's tale, an artifact left by cosmic visitors, is a perfect modern analog to the tablets and sacred objects once said to be gifts from Sumerian gods. Films adapted the idea into imagery that resonated deeply with audiences, suggesting that humanity's leaps in intelligence and technology might have been nudged by others. In this narrative, the Anunnaki were not relics of superstition, but precursors of the extraterrestrials who populate our cultural imagination today. The television series Stargate made the link explicit. Its premise, that ancient gods were in fact alien beings who used advanced technology to pose as deities, directly channels the Anunnaki story. Pyramids became landing pads, hieroglyphs became codes, and myths became disguised history. Viewers were invited to see every ancient monument as evidence of alien intervention, every myth as a distorted memory of contact. While critics dismissed the show as fantasy, its popularity revealed something deeper. Audiences found the fusion of archaeology and extraterrestrial lore both thrilling and strangely plausible. The Anunnaki, by name or by implication, became characters in weekly adventures, their ancient presence woven into serialized drama. Video games expanded this territory. Titles like Assassin's Creed wove storylines where ancient beings manipulated humanity, seeding civilizations and guiding progress. Others, like Mass Effect, explored the idea of advanced alien races shaping galactic history, with humans caught between servitude and independence. Even when not named, the Anunnaki's fingerprint is evident in the archetype. Ancient architects, hidden controllers, gods revealed as aliens. Players exploring ruins, deciphering glyphs, or confronting powerful overlords are unconsciously replaying the same drama written in Mesopotamian myth, but now with a controller in hand. Comic books and graphic novels have also embraced the theme. Superhero universes, with their pantheons of godlike beings descending from the skies, often echo Anunnaki motifs. Characters like Jack Kirby's New Gods or Marvel's Celestials are thinly veiled reinterpretations of ancient myths, massive beings who seed planets, judge species, and wield incomprehensible power. Kirby, fascinated by archaeology and mythology, drew directly on Sumerian and biblical imagery when crafting his cosmic sagas. In these stories, the Anunnaki archetype is updated with futuristic armor and cosmic vistas, but the pattern remains identical. Outsiders arrive, shape humanity, and leave behind monuments and mysteries. Music, too, carries the resonance. Bands across genres have referenced the Anunnaki, from metal groups evoking their might in dark lyrics to electronic artists sampling chants and hymns from Mesopotamian culture. Hip-hop artists weave their name into verses about hidden power and ancient knowledge, while psychedelic musicians use their imagery to evoke altered states and cosmic journeys. The rhythm of drums and electronic beats becomes another kind of tablet, inscribing the old myths in sound for modern ears. Each performance reawakens the ancient aura, transforming gods of clay into symbols of rebellion, transcendence, or mysticism. The internet has amplified this cultural spread. Online forums, YouTube channels, and digital communities circulate theories, artworks, and stories about the Anunnaki, blending archaeology, speculation, and entertainment into an endless stream. Memes depict them as lizard overlords, as benevolent space brothers, or as absent landlords who will one day return. Amateur filmmakers create documentaries, blending footage of ziggurats with CGI spacecraft, presenting myth as fact. In digital spaces, the line between scholarship, speculation, and satire blurs, but the presence of the Anunnaki grows stronger. For many young people, their first encounter with the name comes not from history books, but from memes and videos, ensuring their survival in the collective imagination. This pop culture presence has consequences. On one level, it trivializes the myths, reducing them to entertainment. On another, it democratizes them, making them accessible to millions who might never study cuneiform or ancient history. For better or worse, the Anunnaki have been reborn as cultural symbols, their story retold in ways that resonate with contemporary hopes and fears. Audiences crave narratives where hidden truths are revealed, where human origins are more mysterious than textbooks admit, where gods and aliens blur. In fulfilling that craving, pop culture ensures that the Anunnaki remain relevant, not as dusty relics but as living figures of imagination. The persistence of their imagery across mediums also reveals something about the human condition. We are drawn to stories of outsiders who arrive with wisdom or power, who shape us, but also oppress us, who may return when the time is right. These stories echo the psychological archetypes embedded in the unconscious, but they also address cultural anxieties about technology, authority, and destiny. In a world where corporations seem godlike in scale, where governments hide secrets, where science advances faster than ethics, the Anunnaki serve as a symbolic shorthand. Beings of immense power who stand above us, their motives unclear, their gifts double-edged. Even skeptics who laugh at alien gods cannot fully escape their influence. When they watch a superhero film, play a game about ancient ruins, or listen to a song about cosmic visitors, they are participating in the same narrative, reimagined for modern times. The Anunnaki, in this sense, are not a belief system, but a cultural grammar, a set of images and patterns that artists and audiences use to express ideas about power, mystery, and transcendence. They are woven into the myth-making machinery of modernity, inseparable from the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we come from. The irony is that the more science advances, the more these cultural retellings proliferate. Satellites orbit the Earth, telescopes probe the galaxies, geneticists map our DNA. Yet the hunger for myth, for cosmic drama, does not diminish. If anything, it grows stronger, as the vastness of the universe and the complexity of life remind us how small and fragile we are. In that context, the Anunnaki myth provides comfort and terror. Comfort in the idea that we were guided, terror in the idea that we were exploited. Popular culture captures both, dramatizing them in spectacles of light and sound, ensuring that ancient gods continue to walk among us, if only on screens. In this way, the Anunnaki have achieved immortality not only as figures of archaeology or conspiracy, but as pop icons. They are characters as much as concepts, starring in blockbusters and comic panels, sung in lyrics, debated online. Their story is no longer the property of ancient Sumer, but of a global culture that thrives on remixing, retelling, and reimagining. And in every retelling, their essence survives. Beings from the sky who shaped humanity, whose presence still lingers, whose mystery still compels. That is the true measure of myth's power. Not whether it is factual, but whether it continues to inspire, to unsettle, to demand retelling in every age. The persistence of the Anunnaki in myth and culture owes much to the stones that still stand on Earth, silent witnesses to ages long gone. Archaeological enigmas, monuments whose scale defies explanation, artifacts that seem out of time, alignments that mirror the heavens, feed the suspicion that the ancient stories were not fiction, but memory. Whether in the deserts of Mesopotamia, the sands of Egypt, the jungles of Mesoamerica, or the plateaus of South America, humanity has inherited structures that whisper of lost knowledge, of techniques that seem to surpass the means of their builders. For those who see the Anunnaki in history, These enigmas are not puzzles of human ingenuity alone, but fingerprints of gods who once walked among us. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia are the first step on this path. Rising like stairways to the sky, they embodied the connection between heaven and earth, literal platforms where the gods were believed to descend. The most famous, the ziggurat of Ur, once towered above the plains, its brick terraces aligned with celestial cycles. Archaeologists reconstruct them as temples, but their form suggests more. Massive, tiered structures resembling launch pads or observation towers. To the Sumerians, they were gateways for the Anunnaki, places where rituals bridged the gap between mortal and divine. When viewed from the perspective of ancient astronaut theory, they become not only houses of gods, but functional platforms, technologies disguised as worship. Egypt presents an even more haunting enigma. The pyramids of Giza, colossal in scale and precise in alignment, have long sparked debate. Mainstream archaeology attributes them to human labor, engineering, and determination, but the question remains, why such precision? Why such astronomical alignment? Why such monumental effort? The Great Pyramid, with its near-perfect orientation to the cardinal points and its proportions echoing mathematical constants, suggests knowledge far beyond simple trial and error. Legends attribute their construction to gods, to Thoth or Ra, or to semi-divine kings. Within the Anunnaki framework, the pyramids are not tombs, but legacies, monuments erected under divine instruction. Their true purpose perhaps related to energy, communication, or preservation. Even the enigmatic Sphinx, eroded in ways that suggest greater antiquity than Egypt's official timeline, becomes part of this puzzle. A relic not of dynasties, but of forgotten epochs when gods still walked the earth. Across the ocean, the monuments of Mesoamerica tell the same story in a different language. The pyramids of Teotihuacan, laid out in a plan that mirrors the solar system, rise as if echoing the ziggurats of Sumer. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, portrays a deity who descended from the sky to bring knowledge, eerily similar to Enki or Ea. The Maya, with their complex calendars and astronomical precision, recorded cycles measured in millennia, cycles that some interpret as echoes of celestial orbits described by the Sumerians. To believers, these cultures inherited the same legacy, adapted to new lands, but still remembering beings who came from the stars, shaped civilization, and departed, promising to return. South America offers enigmas even harder to dismiss. The Nazca lines, vast geoglyphs carved into the desert, depict animals, shapes, and long, straight lines visible only from above. Archaeologists propose ritual or astronomical functions, but the scale raises questions. Why make images that can only be appreciated from the sky unless they were meant for viewers above? To those who see the Anunnaki at work, the Nazca Plateau becomes a landing strip, a beacon for returning gods, messages inscribed not for humans, but for those who once descended. Nearby, the megaliths of Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunku defy explanation. Stones weighing hundreds of tons are fitted with precision, interlocked in ways that modern engineers marvel at. The cuts are so exact, the angles so sharp, that conventional tools seem inadequate. Local legends speak of gods or giants who moved the stones effortlessly, shaping fortresses and temples in days. In the Anunnaki narrative, these are the works of divine engineers, their fingerprints left in stone. Even scattered artifacts fuel the mystery. The Baghdad Battery, a clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod, resembles a primitive galvanic cell, raising questions about whether ancient peoples understood electricity. The Antikythera mechanism, a Greek device of gears and dials, predicted celestial movements with precision unmatched until modern clocks. Out-of-place artifacts, crystal skulls, metal spheres, carvings that resemble rockets, are cited as evidence of forgotten or borrowed knowledge. Each by itself might be dismissed, but together they suggest a pattern. Humanity possessed or was given glimpses of technologies not accounted for in conventional history. To those who see the Anunnaki behind these anomalies, the artifacts are remnants of their instruction, tools left behind, or imitations of devices once wielded by gods. Skeptics counter with explanations grounded in human skill and creativity. They point to ingenious engineering, trial and error, symbolic meaning, or ritual purpose. They argue that no evidence of advanced technology or extraterrestrial presence has been found. Yet the persistence of doubt reveals something deeper. These monuments and artifacts inspire awe precisely because they exceed expectations of what ancient humans should have achieved. Whether one believes in the Anunnaki or not, the sense remains that something extraordinary lingers in the stones, a presence that refuses to be fully explained away. What these enigmas reveal is not only the possibility of divine or alien intervention, but the power of mystery itself. Humans are drawn to what cannot be fully explained, to puzzles that defy closure. The monuments become screens onto which we project our questions, our suspicions, our hopes. For believers, they are proof that the gods of Sumer were real, their works scattered across the globe. For skeptics, they are testaments to human ingenuity. For both, they are reminders that the past is not as simple as textbooks suggest, that history is layered, complex, and filled with gaps. In this sense, the archaeological enigmas serve the same function as the myths. They keep us questioning. They prevent closure, forcing us to consider possibilities beyond the obvious. The Anunnaki narrative thrives precisely because it offers a framework that ties these puzzles together, a story that explains not only why the monuments exist, but why they inspire awe. Whether true or not, it binds the enigmas into a coherent myth, a myth that insists the gods of Sumer did not belong only to Mesopotamia, but to the entire human family, leaving their traces wherever civilizations rose. Thus, in stone and artifact, the Anunnaki still speak. They speak through ziggurats aligned to the stars, through pyramids whose purpose remains debated, through geoglyphs that stretch across deserts, through megaliths that defy explanation, through artifacts that hint at lost science. They speak not in words, but in enigmas, in puzzles that draw us back again and again, forcing us to wonder if the old myths were right, if the gods did indeed descend, shape, and depart. Whether one accepts the theory or rejects it, the stones remain, silent yet eloquent, challenging us to explain, to imagine, to believe. If the monuments of the past preserve the mystery of the Anunnaki, the future brims with speculation about their possible return. Myths are never static. They point forward as well as backward, weaving prophecy into memory. In Sumerian texts, the gods depart, promising to come again. In later traditions, echoes of this promise reappear. In the return of Quetzalcoatl among the Aztecs, in the second coming of Christ in Christianity, in cycles of yugas in Hindu cosmology. Each envisions a time when divine or cosmic beings will once more walk among mortals, bringing judgment, renewal, or revelation. To those who interpret the Anunnaki as real, this is not metaphor but prediction, a warning that the gods who once created and ruled humanity may soon resume their role. The idea of their return often centers on cycles, cosmic patterns that repeat. The Sumerians described long orbits and planetary movements tied to the gods. Modern interpreters link this to the hypothetical Planet X, or Nibiru, imagined as a wandering body that periodically swings through the solar system. Though astronomers remain cautious, the notion of a hidden planet with an elongated orbit has not disappeared. If Nibiru exists, believers argue, then its reappearance could signal the return of its inhabitants. The approach of such a world is framed not only as astronomical, but as prophetic, heralding upheaval, disasters, and transformations. Whether literal or symbolic, the expectation of return thrives because it ties the uncertainty of the cosmos to human fate. Prophecy adds fuel to this expectation. Ancient texts, often obscure, are reinterpreted as warnings. Some point to the Book of Revelation, with its visions of beings descending from the heavens, trumpets sounding, and rulers overthrown, as a Christianized version of the return myth. Others cite Hopi prophecies of the blue star Kachina, a celestial sign that a new world age is beginning. New Age channels speak of star brothers, Pleiadians, or other cosmic beings who will reveal themselves when humanity is ready. In each, the pattern is the same. An absent presence will return, testing or guiding us, altering our course. For those who see the Anunnaki behind these stories, prophecy is simply memory projected forward, the ancient cycle repeating once again. The possibility of return is not only a subject of myth, but of science fiction. Films imagine massive ships descending, either to save humanity or enslave it. Novels depict genetic creators arriving to reclaim their experiment. Television dramatizes scenarios of revelation, panic, and transformation. These cultural rehearsals serve as a kind of preparation, allowing us to imagine what it would mean if gods or aliens truly appeared. Would governments reveal the truth or suppress it? Would religions collapse or adapt? Would humanity unite under a new reality or fracture further in fear? The stories are speculative, yet they highlight real anxieties about how fragile our sense of order is, how dependent it is on the assumption that we are alone. If the Anunnaki were to return, reactions would likely divide along familiar lines. Some would welcome them as saviors, interpreters of prophecy, proof that ancient myths were true. Others would see them as conquerors, invaders to resist at all costs. Scientists would demand evidence. Theologians would scramble to reconcile revelation with doctrine. Politicians would weigh alliances and defenses. The spectacle of ships or beings appearing would force a reckoning not only with history, but with identity. Who are we if we were created, not evolved? What becomes of human pride, religion, philosophy, if we must admit we are the product of others? These questions are not comfortable, but they are inevitable if the myth crosses into reality. Even without literal return, the expectation itself shapes culture. Movements form around the idea of awakening, preparing for contact, tuning consciousness to higher frequencies. Communities gather to watch the skies, to meditate on cosmic cycles, to ready themselves for revelation. Some see themselves as chosen, descendants of the Anunnaki, or hybrids with special roles to play. Others dedicate their lives to decoding texts, aligning monuments, or spreading warnings. In this way, the anticipation of return becomes a living force, guiding behavior, shaping belief, providing meaning. For believers, it is not fantasy, but destiny, a future as certain as the rising sun. There is also a darker side. Fear of return fuels apocalyptic visions, from doomsday cults predicting destruction to conspiracy theorists warning of enslavement. Every astronomical anomaly, from eclipses to comets, is seized as evidence. Every political upheaval becomes a sign. In such visions, the Anunnaki are not benefactors but overlords, coming to harvest what they planted, to reclaim what was never ours. These fears resonate with deep anxieties about control, about the fragility of civilization, about the possibility that we are pawns in a game we cannot see. Whether or not the fears are justified, they reveal how profoundly the myth still grips the imagination. Yet one might also see the return differently, not as literal ships, but as metaphorical. The Anunnaki could return through our own technology, through artificial intelligence or genetic engineering, as humanity steps into the role of gods. In this sense, the myth becomes prophecy, fulfilled not by others, but by ourselves. We are the ones who descend from the sky in rockets, who manipulate genomes, who create life in laboratories. The Anunnaki live again in us, not as external beings, but as the powers we now wield. Their return, then, is symbolic of a threshold humanity is crossing, a moment when we must face the same dilemmas they once embodied. How to use power, how to balance creation with responsibility, how to govern without enslaving. The expectation of return, whether literal or metaphorical, reminds us of the enduring power of myth. Myths survive because they address timeless concerns: origin, destiny, meaning, and power. The Anunnaki myth does all these, telling us where we came from, warning us of cycles, promising that what was once will be again. Whether we await alien ships, divine judges, or technological breakthroughs, the structure is the same. Something greater will come, and humanity will be tested. In this sense, the return of the Anunnaki is less about their reality than about ours. About how we live in anticipation, how we prepare for transformation, how we imagine the future through the lens of the past. As telescopes search the skies and prophecies are reinterpreted with each new crisis, the myth remains alive. Perhaps no ships will come, no planet will appear, no gods will descend. Perhaps the Anunnaki will remain what they have always been, shadows in memory, reflections of ourselves. Yet even then, their return is real, for they return in every story told, every prophecy repeated, every gaze lifted to the heavens in expectation. The future, like the past, is written with their name. The story of the Anunnaki, traced from clay tablets to conspiracy forums, from temples of mud brick to glowing screens, reveals more than a tale of gods or aliens. It reveals the enduring hunger of humanity for meaning, for connection, for explanation of our place in the cosmos. To call them deities, extraterrestrials, archetypes, or metaphors is less important than to recognize what they embody. The desire to understand origins and destiny, the suspicion that power is never fully visible, the awe that monuments and myths still inspire. In following their shadow across ages, we discover not only who the Anunnaki are supposed to be, but who we are when we imagine them. Their story began in Mesopotamia, in the cradle of civilization, where scribes pressed symbols into wet clay, preserving memories of beings who descended from the heavens. Those texts gave shape to gods who created, ruled, quarreled, and departed. But their legacy did not remain confined to that place or those people. Instead, the pattern spread. Gods from the sky in Egypt, feathered serpents in Mesoamerica, shining ones in Africa, devas and asuras in India. Across continents, cultures echoed the same rhythm. Beings beyond humanity arrive, impart knowledge or rule, and then retreat, leaving humans with memory and longing. This universality is not easily explained away. It suggests either a shared imagination rooted in psychology or a shared history rooted in encounters we can barely fathom. As centuries passed, the Anunnaki transformed. Medieval scribes recast them as fallen angels, weaving them into biblical frameworks. Renaissance scholars rediscovered the tablets, puzzling over their strange gods. Modern thinkers, armed with archaeology and comparative mythology, tried to rationalize them as symbols or metaphors, yet they never disappeared. Instead, they adapted, slipping into new forms: the ancient astronauts of speculative history, the reptilian overlords of conspiracy theory, the architects of pyramids in popular culture. They survived because they remained useful, not as facts, perhaps, but as frameworks, stories through which we express both awe and fear. Psychology tells us that archetypes endure because they reflect the structures of the human mind. The Anunnaki are not only beings from the sky, but projections of authority, of parenthood, of creation and control. They are the gods who give and withhold, the masters who command and exploit, the rebels who defy and liberate. In this sense, they are mirrors in which we see power itself, whether divine, political, or personal. The myths persist because the dynamics they describe persist. We still live in worlds shaped by unseen powers, still struggle with authority and freedom, still wrestle with questions of origin and purpose. Archaeology complicates the picture. Stones aligned to stars, artifacts that seem out of place, monuments whose scale defies easy explanation. All feed the sense that something extraordinary happened long ago. Whether explained by human ingenuity or by forgotten visitors, they serve as touchstones of mystery, reminding us that history is not a closed book. They leave gaps that myths rush to fill, and in those gaps the Anunnaki thrive. Their survival is not only about belief, but about curiosity, about the refusal to accept neat answers when the evidence itself resists simplicity. Conspiracy theories magnify the myth for a modern age. In a world where elites seem distant, where institutions hide truths, where technology feels alien, the Anunnaki become symbols of hidden masters. They are recast as reptilian rulers, secret bloodlines, alien overlords. While such stories often distort and mislead, they reveal a psychological truth. People feel powerless, manipulated, deceived. The Anunnaki myth expresses that truth in dramatic form, a cosmic allegory of control and rebellion. In that sense, even the wildest theories say something real, not about aliens, perhaps, but about how humans experience authority in the modern world. At the same time, the Anunnaki inspire hope. For some, they are saviors, teachers who will return to guide humanity. For others, they are warnings, reminders of what happens when power is unchecked. For artists, they are inspiration, fueling novels, films, songs, and games. For seekers, they are mysteries that invite endless exploration. The very ambiguity of the myth, are they gods, aliens, archetypes, symbols, makes them powerful, for it allows each generation to reshape them according to its fears and dreams. They are not frozen in the past, but alive in the present, mutable as myth itself. Looking toward the future, the Anunnaki will not fade. Whether or not ships ever descend, their presence is assured, because they live in the stories we tell. If humanity colonizes Mars, the question will arise, did the gods once come here too? If we create artificial intelligence that surpasses us, we will wonder, have we become the Anunnaki ourselves, shaping life in our image? If we encounter other civilizations among the stars, we will ask, are these the same beings our ancestors described? In every scenario, the myth is ready, waiting to give shape to the unknown. Perhaps that is the true gift of the Anunnaki. They remind us that mystery is part of being human. They are not answers but questions, not conclusions but invitations to wonder. Whether read as history or metaphor, they draw us into reflection on power, on destiny, on creation. They insist that we are part of something larger, whether cosmic drama or collective imagination. They teach us that myths endure not because they are proven, but because they speak to needs that science and reason alone cannot satisfy. The story ends as it began, in silence and awe. The ziggurats crumble, the tablets crack, the stars wheel overhead, and still we ask, who came before us? Who shaped us? Who will come again? Perhaps no one. Perhaps only ourselves. Or perhaps, in some distant age, the Anunnaki will descend once more, their presence undeniable, their mystery unveiled. Until then, they remain here in stone and story, in memory and imagination, in the restless human heart that longs for origins and destinies beyond itself. And so their tale continues, whispered from ancient clay to modern screens, a bedtime story for a species still awake in wonder, still gazing at the stars.